Okay, Charlie, I just unmuted.
Okay, folks, let me know when you're ready to go.
Let me sober up a little bit. Okay, countdown. Okay, Regina? About to start our meeting.
You ready for a countdown? I'm sorry.
Yep.
Okay, excellent. I'm going to hit
Recording in
record.
progress.
Webinar is now being recorded. Anyone needs to be promoted. Anyone wins the call needs to be promoted on the select board. Raise your hand in the Zoom call, and I'll promote you. And we will get started in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good evening. I'm Bernard Green, Chair of the Brookline Select Board, and this is the meeting of the Select Board, the regular meeting, for April 30th, 2024. First, a couple of announcements I'd like to make. I'm first pleased to announce that Alexandra Vecchio has been selected as our new Director of Sustainability and Natural Resources. A lot of people have been very anxious to have that position filled, and it's now finally filled, and we will be doing great things through this division. Next, this will be Miriam's last select board meeting. As you know, she's running for the school committee. She's moving from the frying pan into the fire. Or whatever. But we wish you well, and if you're elected, we'll continue to work with you, but in a different way. And we hope that we'll have the same type of very nice relationship with you that we've had on the select board. Nice in the sense that we disagree, but we are not disagreeable in how we interact with each other. And I appreciate that. Personally appreciate that. I think other select board members do too. So all the best. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Okay.
And it's been a pleasure. I'll help you work on something.
Okay. Any other updates or comments from the select board?
I have one.
Okay.
I need to speak into the microphone. I wanted to just remind folks that the calls for the comprehensive plan steering group are still open. There's a link on the homepage if you go to brooklinema.gov that will take you to describe the duties of the steering group. And then there's a link in there to apply. We of course, not everybody that applies will be appointed, but we certainly welcome folks to participate in the application process. And again, those applications are due Friday, May 3rd is the deadline.
Great. Miriam.
I have a few quick words. So, these are going to be my final remarks at the start of the last select board meeting. First, I do want to address an email the select board received accurately pointing out that Chair Green made a very powerful statement against hate in response to violent anti-Semitic graffiti at the MBAT stop, but that we had been remiss in doing so with prior hateful Islamophobic graffiti. I'm glad this was brought to our attention, and I apologize. I can only speak for myself, but I'm sure I'm not alone when this saying that this select board and Chair Green's remarks absolutely meaning hate has no home here in Brookline, anti-Semitic, Islamophobic, or otherwise.
Thank you.
I did think a lot about what else I might say tonight, and I will, in my usual fashion, I think, keep it short. First, I really do want to thank you, my fellow select board members. I think we are a great model for civil discourse. We disagree, we negotiate, we compromise, we listen to each other, we learn, and it's been an honor to serve you. I shout out to Heather, who has really become a very good friend of mine, who one would never have imagined. We really sit on very different political places, and yet we have built a big friendship, a very important friendship for me. I do want to thank Joe, the amazing commissioners, chiefs, department heads, staff, and the volunteers that make this town work. I hope when the annual report comes out, you take a minute to read what I have written. It is a real nod to town staff and commissioners, the folks who really make the town hum. And I really think it's worth acknowledging them. I started my time on the select board with groundbreaking at Driscoll School, and today I finished it with a groundbreaking at the new fully passive 32 Marion Street housing, Brookline Housing Authority building. And I feel very proud of what I've accomplished in the last 3 years together with this board. I will read a very short favorite poem of mine by Emily Dickinson because it really sums up how I feel about myself, about what we do here, about the town, about the world. The heart is the capital of the mind. The mind is a single state. The heart and the mind together make a single continent. One is the population, numerous enough. This ecstatic nation, seek. It is yourself. That's it. Thank you. And of course, please remember to vote.
And if you will, write up your comments and give them to Miriam.
Yes, sorry.
Right. I'd appreciate it if you wrote up your comments and gave them to Kate to include in the minutes. I think they're worth including for posterity or whatever. Okay, any other updates or comments? Jazz.
I have a couple. Pleased to announce that Brookline Green electricity rates will be reduced starting in December. Thank the select board for their leadership and guidance in joining us into this program. As you know, our Good Energy is our energy broker and manager. We renew our rates on a three-year basis, or rather, our last contract is going to expire in December. Through the really diligent efforts of the planning team and Kara Bruton and her team and everyone who's been involved in this on the town side, town council's office, procurement, we have been able to secure a significant reduction in the cents per kilowatt hour that will be supplied during the 37-month contract, it's really the 36 and change month contract plan. The default will continue to be 100% renewable energy. Consumers will have the option at any time to remain in the Brookline Green product. They can go down to the Brookline Basic, which goes to the minimum level required by the state, or the all green method with 100% Massachusetts Class 1 renewable energy credits. You can also opt out completely and use the Eversource rates, but those rates are higher. Right now in the Brookline Green program, you pay 16 cents per kilowatt hour. Beginning in December 2024, you will pay 14.6 cents. On the All Green program, you now pay 18.6 cents an hour, a kilowatt hour. In December of 24, you will pay 17.5. And on the Brookline Basic program, current price is 14.7 cents a kilowatt hour, and will go down to 13.4. So again, a real win on the procurement team, the planning team, and we want to thank everyone and the select board for making that possible.
Could you tell the public how to apply for that?
This is an opt-out program. You automatically sign up for this program when you sign up for energy. When you get your energy bill, if it says Eversource Basic Service as opposed to Brookline Green, All Green, or Brookline Basic, please contact the planning department and we will get you in touch with the right people. The National Community Survey is available until May 9th. A link is available on the website. We have heard members' concerns about, logging in, providing access information. We know that can sometimes be a barrier. We have to do that to ensure that we are getting residents involved. We are getting residents of Brookline involved in this. We want to promise people that signing up for a Polco is the contractor, will not share your information in any sort of selling and packaging the information way. It is just a means of ensuring that we have reliable data from Brookline residents in response to this. But thank you for your feedback that you provided so far. Thank you if you filled it out. If you haven't filled it out, please do. There was an incident over the last week and into the weekend regarding a police tactical response to a fake call. I just want to thank Chief Pastor. These are so-called swatting incidences. There were actually two of them. I want to thank Chief Pastor and the entire rapid response team for their really commendable efforts at, upon being told there was a crisis in progress, verifying the information, not going into a situation that could be, going into a situation with the appropriate level of response. That is to say, taking it seriously, but also verifying the information, making sure that if there was a real threat, it would be handled. If this was, as suspected, a swatting incident, that the individuals in question would be taken care of in a safe way and not responded to with disproportionate tactics. It is just a real reminder that we have a great police force and a great responsive team on this. And I want people to be aware that if these incidences do occur, that you report them to the police department, that you provide them with any information that you can. The only way we can stop this behavior is if people involved, if you know the possibility of danger, that you report it. So thank you to the chief and to the whole team for that diligent response to that. And the one last thing I have is that the annual report will be posted online with the combined, in conjunction with the combined reports. So it will be very exciting.
When?
Sorry. It will be posted online next week. And so hopefully it will go out with the combined reports. Thanks. Sorry for the many updates.
Oh, no problem. And as Miriam mentioned, I also urge everyone to read the combined reports. Over the last few years, we have done not combined reports, annual reports in a little different way. The chair of the select board does a sort of general statement for the select board, and each individual select board member does their own statement, or discussing their observations of their year on the select board and the things that have happened during that time. So, I join Miriam in urging everyone to look for it and read it. So, seeing nothing, no other hands raised, I'd like to go to our miscellaneous calendar, approval of minutes from April 2nd, 2024. Any edits or corrections? No? Okay, I move approval of the minutes of the select board meeting of April 2nd, 2024. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Let's see, who do I start off with? Miriam.
You do.
Okay.
Aye.
Mike Sandman.
Aye.
Paul Warren.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. I'm gonna have to sort of get used to it.
I won't take offense because John's.
Okay, next, I'm going to take items 3B to 3I in omnibus fashion, except that I note that item 3G I'm sorry?
Public comment.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's my fault.
Okay. Charlie, I forgot public comment. So
It's all right. I'm here to read it when we're ready. So I suppose we're ready now. Thank you for joining us for public comment. This is an opportunity for us to hear your perspective on the issues in Brookline that matter to you. Each person speaking tonight is limited to 3 minutes. You don't need to use the entire time, but you may if you like. Once 15 minutes has been met, there's an opportunity at the conclusion of the select board's business for additional comment. Members of the public sometimes raise questions during public comment. We may be able to provide a quick answer to a question, but are more likely to work with staff to get a more thorough answer and respond over email. We'll let you know when you have 30 seconds remaining and when your time is up. Please conclude your remarks at that time. If you have more to say, you're welcome to send an email to board members expressing your thoughts in greater detail. The first person signed up for public comment is Sana Hafiz. Sana is on Zoom. Thank you for raising your hand, Sana. I'm promoting you to a panelist now, and your 3 minutes will begin.
Thank you. And do I have share screen capacity?
oh,
No, we don't permit shared screen capacity here.
Well, how am I supposed to share, what I'd like to share then with folks?
It's not allowed. If you want to send something in advance, you can send something in advance, but we don't allow individuals to share their screen.
I have shared my screen in person before at select board meetings, but that's fine. That's for another day. I guess I'll just cover some main points then. As far as this board trying to do damage control, it's a little too late. You want to say this after the bridge forum yesterday evening, where some of us discussed the truth about Brookline and everyone else gave nice sounding nothing answers that make people feel comfortable. Instead of addressing this when I, as well as countless other Muslim community members, repeated this issue, you folks decide to address it now. No more apologies. It's time for accountability and it's time for change. And like Miriam said, vote May 7th. In the last 2 years, we've seen a clear pattern reoccurring. This town government is biased and has discriminated against residents, specifically against people and organizations of color, while at the same time preaching equality, equity, and inclusion, many words without action. What I can clearly see is plain hypocrisy, and I'll share some examples with you. I was going to share some remarks from someone that I believe Mike and Miriam know. They should know who I'm referring to because they served on a committee with him. This is how they talk about themselves. Again, I'll be quoting something that is, not my verbiage and not from me whatsoever, but it is a direct quote from an ARPA review committee member. And I'll begin. Miriam's 2 Black children have taken her a long way in the phony liberal progressive political arena in Brookline. Meantime, there is
Hold on.
You have to let him speak.
Okay.
You have to let her speak.
I just note that this is an attack on a select board member, and
this attack is
her
not made by
children.
me. I'm referring to how you talk about each other. The same folks that are preaching equity. Now, if I could continue my time, I will.
You may continue. Please do.
Thank you. In the liberal progressive political arena in Brookline. Meantime, there isn't a Black person on the school committee, the public housing authority, as well as many other boards and commissions because of their color. Another email, quote, delineates how an ARPA review committee member had a private phone call with Deborah Brown, BIC, ARPA applicant now known as BCDC. In that same email, you can see them say, 5 minutes following that meeting, you and I spoke, everyone heard it, legal or not, this is the deal that I signed up for. On the Zoom that everyone overheard, the phone call you made to me during the ARPA review committee meeting, the $250,000 I sweetened your big ARPA grant with. We cannot have governance like this. This is not accountable. This is not transparent. This is not just. This is just another example of how the ARPA misappropriation of funds have severely impacted our communities. We cannot have change if we do not have accountability. I would love to discuss this more, but again, I'm not able to share the details with you. I am being stifled by town governance once again. I'll leave it to there. And I encourage all of you to vote change on May 7th. I encourage you to look at thepeopleforbrookline.com, reach out. I have a weekly Zoom every Wednesday from 6 to 7 p.m. where I want to hear from regular residents like you for the issues that, like me, are not allowed to be talked about by Brookline's governance. Thank you.
The next person signed up for public.
Charlie, can you give me a second? I just want
Go
to be
ahead.
sure that people understand the rules on public comment. In the past, we have allowed individuals who have visual aids to share them. We've asked them to share them in advance with staffs that staff can share. That's to limit the use of the screen sharing function. It's been my recommendation to the board, and we'll take it up at a future date, to cease that practice. It's not in response to any particular event. It's the fact that, honestly, at one point, staff members were asked to run a 6-slide presentation for someone, run videos for them. It suggests a level of interconnectivity with staff that I don't feel comfortable with. Now, obviously, it's the board's decision, but I just think, we're at the present, the policy is staff share, individual items that are shared in advance if asked by a community member, provided they don't violate the law or the rules. So they can't share electioneering, they can't share things that are defamatory, et cetera. But they can, or they give, again, they can't share things that are against the law or the rules. But in the future, it would be my recommendation just to remove staff from that process entirely. So that's why we don't allow screen sharing here. And we have never, to my knowledge, allowed individuals to share screen during public comment.
Let me add one other thing. So the purpose of public comment is to give the public an opportunity to have their say and hopefully influence the board with their comments. When an individual board member is targeted by public comment, you have a right to do that, but we have a right to take that into consideration in terms of your credibility and the value of what you're offering in public comment. So I think the mention of Miriam and her children was out of line. And while you have a right to say that, we have a right to take that as speaking to your credibility or the speaker's credibility, and whether their views are going to be influential or persuasive with us. So thank you. Okay, next, Charlie.
The next person signed up for public comment is Ade Ijanasi. Ade, you may share your screen and your video if you're, and unmute if you're comfortable, and your 3 minutes will begin. You are promoted now, Ade, if you're ready to speak. Maybe we'll come back to Ade at this point. The next person signed up for public comment is Janice Khan. Janice, is Janice in the room at the moment? If so,
Janice
you
is
may-
in the room.
Thank you. You may approach the presentation station and your 3 minutes will begin.
Okay, thank you very much, Charlie. And thank you for this opportunity to speak to the Select Board. I'm Janice Khan, town meeting member from Precinct 15. I'm speaking as someone who's lived in Brookline for over 40 years, who raised a family here, who's served on town boards, including the Commission for Women and the Advisory Committee, and who's concerned about the direction our town seems to be going in. On the national level, we are being asked, are we a nation of laws? And I would argue that we need to look at ourselves as well and ask, are we a town of laws? Two recent incidents raised that question for me. The first concerns Article 97 land abutting Pierce School. The town has known about this issue for at least 2 years, and there is a legal process to allow for what was being proposed, changing the use, at least under the ground, for Article 97 protected land. To meet a deadline, the process within Brookline was compressed into a few hours. The Conservation Commission and the Park and Rec Commission had to vote unanimously to approve it. And there also needed to be a public hearing. Only the Park and Rec Commission at that meeting even raised a concern. The Conservation Commission remained silent. And when a member of the public raised a legitimate concern, that person was shouted out to stop when going over the allotted 2 minutes. And I would say that the 2-minute provision was put in because as a consequence of this compressed time frame for fulfilling what is a state law. The second is the creation of a separate division within DPW. The last time there was a reorganization of the DPW, the town filed a home rule petition that amended the special act that defines the Department of Public Works. In this case, there was no home rule petition. This legal process was skirted by calling it a pilot, but that word exists only in one's imagination. It's not in writing anywhere, and it's not in the financial plan, for instance. But more concerning to me is not the outcome. I support both the goal of building a fossil fuel free school and the importance of a sustainability director with staff support. It's the process which has silenced voices and not followed the spirit in one case and the actual law in the other. So I ask my elected representatives to ponder the question, is Brookline a town of laws? And if yes, which
You have 30 seconds.
Yep. Which I believe we aspire to be. We pass bylaws at pretty much every town meeting. I find what's happening here is concerning. Again, I appreciate the opportunity to make this public comment. Thank you for your time.
It looks like Ade might be available to speak now. Ade, if you'd like to share your screen and unmute or whatever you're comfortable with, your 3 minutes will begin.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Ade Janice, Brookline resident. I wanted to speak, but Chaz, man, you guys, as a resident, just wanted to say, boy, you guys are digging yourself in a deeper hole. As much as you guys would want to attack Santa or try to make it look like that, Miriam does have a copy of that email. You too as well, Chaz. So that is not a Santa. You guys try to make it look like it's a Santa thing. You know exactly what's going on. You don't like the truth and exactly what you guys have been doing to Black and brown communities. And that game that you guys want to play, town council is going to have his hand full with that, including that motion to discriminate against Black people illegally when he warned Katie Pufferman about that. The records are there on town meeting server. So I'm a big guy of facts. I'm a big fan of that as well. You guys have been misusing powers, and from the ethics issue to you sit on the chair there for 3 years and you think you have to run people's lives. The beautiful thing about this country, there's law and order. And we know how to go about it the right way too as well. And Mikey, if you could please stop sending organization issues to campaign emails, that'd be well appreciated. You're breaching a lot of laws through there as well. I know you guys don't like to listen to town council and do what you want and put us as a town in bad situations. We've seen the Jared Austin situation, and that is very, very minute to what is coming. There is a price to pay. You don't discriminate against Black people like me and my community and think you get to walk away free. This is not the eras of the old times, fellas. And that's all I have to say, because we getting limited. We can't share anything, and you guys can change the rule as much as you want. Facts don't go away. So Miriam, you could check your email before you get mad at Sana and everybody. You know who exactly said that. And that goes a lot to show what type of community and leaders we let lead this community. Thank you.
Next person signed up for public comment is Regina Frawley. Regina, if you are welcome to approach the presentation station, and your 3 minutes will begin.
Gina Frawley, town meeting member from precinct 16. Good evening. I just have a few very brief talkers. One has to do with two have to do with the Pierce project. And I would ask the explanation after my 3 minutes. What does it mean, guaranteed maximum price budget? Because I saw that at the extension of the high school, the STEM building, and every other week they were coming for more money. I don't know what that language means. I know that I learned the hard way that perpetuity in the law means 30 years, and it doesn't mean it in English, but that's what it means in the law. So I was wondering what that means, because they keep coming back usually for more money. I also want to bring up the possibility that, is there any way that the geothermal you're aiming toward the Pierce School can be somehow piggybacked the town library, the town health department, and town hall, and do it in one? Maybe you need an extra well or two, whatever it takes, but be done with it. That's just a question I raised, because I think that's a good idea if you can do it. And last but not least, I see that the ARPA reallocation is a real issue that might happen. I hope you will consider the senior center for some of that reallocation, because they really need it for things like transportation as well as for other services. Thank you.
Okay, that concludes the folks.
We have one more person signed up in person, who's Susan Park.
Thanks.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Susan Park. I'm a select board candidate. I do want to thank Miriam, since this is your last select board meeting. Thank you for your service for these last 3 years. And really, I just came on behalf of BAFN, the Brookline Asian American Family Network, as the co-chair for the BAFNs for their 9th essay contest. I'd like to personally invite you all to our award ceremony, and that's May 15th. That's a Wednesday night from 6 to 8 p.m. At the Coolidge Corner Theater from 6 to 8. And we have 5 students who won these, the awards, and that's Haley Kim for her essay, The Fan Dance Language, Karan Bhatia, Indianish, Finding a Way Back to My Identity, Gio Elansmar, her essay is called The Sticky Heat, Melanie Ho, essay is called Reading in Between the Lines, and Bella Wang, Lost in My Own Voice. We will also have the author, the infamous Mira T. Lee. She's our keynote speaker. She wrote the book, Everything Here is Beautiful. After the event, we're going to have a reception, and we hope that you all can come. And I'm here also in person, because I'd like to invite the public who's watching and who watches the video, and we hope everyone shows up for this wonderful celebration. This is the 9th year, so thank you.
Okay, is that it?
Charlie, yep.
So we have a few more minutes. We could take one more at this point. That would be probably the last person we could have, though, before the end of the meeting.
Sure.
That sounds good. Okay. Looks like Danelle has asked to speak. I'm going to promote Danelle now. Danelle, you've been promoted to a panelist. You can unmute and share your video if you're comfortable, and your 3 minutes will begin.
Thank you, Charlie. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Donald O'Neill, Senior Town Meeting Member for Precinct 4. I'm also on the Advisory Committee. Right away, this public comment section, you heard from minorities in this town. That bridge candidates forum, I remember when it first started, I think, I was running it against you, Bernard, when that first forum started. And there's a lot of division in town, and somehow, some way, these people sitting up here and the ones that are leaving, we have to lead. Okay, everyone needs to lead in this town and try to work together. We're hearing people say they're not happy in all groups, but mainly a population that has shrunk in this town it has been crying out for help. Referrals, and when we refer something at town meeting, especially if there's a date attached to it, we should actually do something about it instead of doing these referrals and with resolutions that have dates but really have no meaning because there's no effect, there's no implementation. Even select board policies. I remember, Bernard, when we were both running, we changed the select board policy on public comment. And there were reasons. There was good reason for that. Folks sit up there and serve because they want to. And that means taking it all in, the good, the bad, the ugly, the happy, everything. So we as residents and voters here do not want to hear any complaints from those sitting where you are. We want to see actions. We want to see these policies that have been created acted on. That's all I have to say. Thank you. You guys have a good evening. Thank you, Charlie.
Okay, that sounds good. So I think we have reached our 15 minutes at the beginning of the meetings. That would conclude public comment for now, unless folks want to speak at the end.
Okay, I will now take items 3B to 3I in omnibus fashion, except that I note with respect to item 3G, it refers to a proclamation for National Public Service Recognition Week, which will be celebrated during the week of May 5 to May 11, 2024. And the Select Board, by approving this proclamation, urges all residents of Brookline to celebrate public servants and their contributions this week and throughout the year. Also, item 3H is a proclamation acknowledging Jewish Heritage Month that will be read by Mike Sandman.
You want to do that now? Yeah. Okay, thank you, Bernard. I also want to thank Scott Gladstone, who provided us with the template for this. We have done some editing, but nonetheless, we very much appreciate the template. And before I read this, I want to say that May 1st is the start of both Jewish American and Asian American Month. And this proclamation recognizes Jewish American Heritage Month. Later in May, we will, I hope, recognize the heritage of Asian Americans with a similar proclamation. So, whereas the United States has many heritage months and commemorations that celebrate the various communities that form the mosaic of our country, because of those celebrations, we learn about one another, we honor the richness of our diverse nation, and we strengthen the fabric of American society. Whereas since 2007, Presidents Bush, Obama, Trump, and Biden have all issued proclamations for Jewish American Heritage Month, which celebrate Jewish Americans and encourage all Americans to learn more about Jewish heritage and contributions to the United States. Whereas Jewish American Heritage Month has its origins in 1980, when Congress passed a resolution which authorized and requested the president to issue a proclamation designating April 21st through 28th in 1980 as Jewish Heritage Week. Obviously, we've had some inflation. Whereas the American Jewish community dates back to 1654, when a group of 23 Jews fleeing persecution at the hands of the Portuguese Inquisition fled Brazil and found refuge in New Amsterdam, now New York. From that tiny group, the American Jewish community has grown to over 6 million, representing approximately 2% of the American population today. Whereas Brookline has been a welcoming bastion of inclusion for our Jewish community members for over 100 years, as a home to multiple diverse congregations of numerous denominations. Whereas over the past 370 years, Jewish Americans have given to their communities and been loyal and patriotic citizens, always grateful for the safe harbor that American provided for them. American Jews have always pushed America to live up to its promise as a nation that upholds freedom and justice for all. Today, many American Jews are feeling increasingly vulnerable amidst the rise in anti-Semitism, as are American Muslims feeling a rise in Islamophobia. History has shown that most groups and individuals who express hatred of any minority group will also express hatred toward Jews. Because of that understanding, American Jews have been active participants in the fight against all forms of racial and ethnic hatred. For example, through the actions of the Anti-Defamation League, the Jewish Community Relations Council, and other Jewish organizations. And the final whereas, the strength of a society can be measured in part by how they protect their minority populations and celebrate their contributions. And it's altogether fitting to once again mark May as Jewish American Heritage Month. Now, therefore, we members of the Select Board of the Town of Brookline do hereby proclaim May 2024 as Jewish American Heritage Month in the Town of Brookline. We call upon all residents of our town to learn more about the heritage and contribution of Jewish Americans in conjunction with acknowledging the contributions of all minorities who contribute to American life, and to observe this month with appropriate programs, activities, and ceremonies. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. So now I move approval of items 3B to 3I. All in favor? I'm sorry.
No.
Oh, I thought you wanted to say
No,
something. Okay. Okay. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Miriam Ashkenazi.
Enthusiastically, aye.
Okay. Michael Sandman.
Aye.
Paul Warren.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Thank you, Mike, for reading that.
Chag Sameach.
It's over.
Is it still?
No, it's over.
No, it's over. I take it back. Oh, it ends tonight. You're as bad as you.
Wait, you don't want to stay for our exciting meeting?
Sun's not down yet.
Okay.
Lots of water.
Okay, wait, let's not disrupt the meeting.
Yeah, he's right.
It's they're so bad.
Okay, question, let's see. So we just voted miscellaneous items. Next. Question of approving the authorization to hire request from the chief of police for a public safety dispatcher. One, do we have Chief Pastor or someone?
Promoting the chief now.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry about that. Good evening, Chief Pastor. Before you tonight to request the authorization to hire one dispatcher to replace one of our dispatchers whose last day was today. She'll be leaving us for a position in the Norfolk County Clerk's office. We're sad to see her go, but we have some good candidates in the pipeline with your approval.
Okay, any questions?
Yeah, I just have a procedural quick question. So this evening in our consent agenda, we approved a number of positions. And I'm just curious, is there any particular reason why we need to have any hire for the police department separated versus being in the consent agenda?
There is not, except tradition. You as the select board are still technically the police commissioners, as you are the fire commissioners. That it has been long discussed. What does that mean? And the answer is it's a ceremonial role, but it's still one of importance. And so in the past, when we have had authorizations to hire police and fire, also historically civil services played a role in that, but that doesn't necessarily have an impact on where the authorization to hire needs to sit. You are required to actually hire all sworn officers of police and fire, but this authorization does not need to appear on the main agenda.
Yeah, I guess my feedback would be that certainly when someone's being promoted, I think that recognition is important, but it feels a little unequal treatment to a dispatcher that's just being rehired because someone left. I'd love to see those kind of moved into the consent agenda in the future. It's my view. Thank you.
Does anyone object to that?
No.
Okay.
We'll discuss with the public safety team, make sure that besides tradition, there's nothing else requiring it, and
Thank you.
we'll move from there.
We should be glad that there's only one DPW commissioner.
Okay. So I move approval of the authorization to hire request from the chief of police. All in favor for public safety dispatcher. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Miriam Ashkenazi,
Aye.
Michael Sandman.
Aye.
Paul Warren.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Next, Pierce Project, early guaranteed maximum price budget. Chaz, you're gonna give us some background on that,
Well,
including, I think, to address, I'm sorry, someone else is gonna do it?
I was going to let our PM our deputy director for capital Lapyan speak.
Okay. I'd like Lap to also address the issue that Regina raised. That is, why we're continually increasing or making budget updates once we have a guaranteed maximum price, which is a function of our contingency from where those costs come from. But Lap can explain it much better.
Sure. Thank you very much, Chairman. My name is Lapyan. I am the Deputy Director of Capital Construction in the Building Department for the town of Brookline. Pierce is basically my project. GMP stands for Guaranteed Maximum Price. To addressing the previous comment about that, there are changes along the way, requests by the town. For example, we may want to control some units that are that were not originally in the drawings. We tried the best we can to cover all bases. For the Pierce, we had lessons learned from the Driscoll School, and we walked the architect and the engineers through it and showed them what we want and what we expect, and some missed scope of work at Driscoll that we included in Pierce. So unfortunately, we're only human, and we do make mistakes, and we try to cover it with the scope of work, and sometimes we do better job than other times. And in this case, I think for Pierce, we did a really excellent job covering all our bases here. So that's a brief little explanation of why we do cost overruns even on guaranteed maximum prices. I don't know if you guys want me to go any further than that on that. As regards to the other question about can we tie in the geotherms into the library, unfortunately, this system is designed just to service the new school, which is a large school, and there aren't any interconnections between the school and the library at this point. It'd be wonderful if we could, but there is no provisions at this point to do that. To the question at hand, which is the early guaranteed maximum price request. We chose the construction manager at risk delivery method for this project because schools are very time sensitive, and we want to open up the school as soon as possible so we can service the student population over at Brookline. As one of the reasons why we chose the construction manager at risk delivery method is that it can significantly shorten the timeline from the time we start the project to when we open the doors at the school. One of the methods that we use to do it is reduce drawings in advance so we can buy out the packages, the disciplines, the trades that are required at the beginning without having fully developed construction documents. The general method of delivery in Massachusetts by default is what's called the general contract method, Article 149, which is basically having the architects and designer design a full, complete set of drawings, and then what I would call to throw it over the wall, give it to the general contractor, bid it out, and then the low bid or the most qualified bidder would then start construction on that. Obviously, that takes a little bit more time. There's a complicated building like Pierce. It could take over. It has taken over a year and a half, close to 2 years to do a fully design, and we're still not even there yet. So at this point, where we're at the design level, we have what's we're expecting in about another month or two, what's called 60% construction documents. So the construction documents are 60% complete. But with the construction manager at risk delivery method, we were able to isolate certain trades that we will need to start the project even before the construction documents are fully designed and fully drawn out. These trades include asbestos hazardous material abatement, certain utilities cutoffs, and demolition. So the original budget is $168 million for Pierce. We're asking the select board to approve approximately 13 million and change. And the good news is we did incur some $2 million in cost savings on this $13 million early release guaranteed maximum price budget. I stand by to answer any questions as need be.
Great, thank you. Any questions from the select board? Oh,
I don't have a question. I just have a quick comment. I wanted to make sure to clarify when projects come to us and we're getting, I think Regina had suggested continue, and she's correct, a request for additional monies and change orders. Often those are within the amount of money, which is the contingency, as you mentioned, Bernard. But there's also a factor of just unknowns. I recall the high school in the science wing, when that was coming down, there was an unknown that we discovered, which had to do with a wall that had, significant cost implications. And of course, COVID struck, and we had a redefinition of actually how you do construction remote. You can't do it over Zoom. And of course, doing the deal with the MBTA and trying to build over the tracks, which I hope we never, ever, ever do again. But I do think that there's, there are unknowns, and that's what the contingency is for. And should we go beyond the contingency, of course, that money needs to be approved by town meeting and appropriated. And then if it goes beyond a certain percentage, the Department of Revenue asks us and requires us to go back to the voters for approval. So there are a number of stopgaps there as well.
okay, any other questions or comments from the select board? Okay, I'd like to move approval of amendment in the amount of $13,150,019 with Consigli Construction for early GMP budget related to the Pierce School project. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Miriam Ashkenazi.
Aye.
Michael Sandman.
Aye.
Paul Warren.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Great. Next, we don't have the public comment on the agenda anymore. Okay.
Did you want public comment on this?
No. I had the public comment policy.
Oh, yeah, no, we took,
on the-
I'm sorry, we
okay.
took that off.
I have an old agenda. That's-
Yes, sorry.
Okay. Next, ARPA reallocation, review and possible vote on a plan to reallocate American Rescue Plan Act funding from projects unable or unlikely to be completed by relevant deadlines to new or existing projects able to meet such deadlines. Chaz, you want to present this?
Sure, thank you. And thanks to the board for the leadership and for the continued guidance on American Rescue Plan Act funding. Brookline received nearly $44 million in local fiscal recovery funds from the American Rescue Plan Act. That is a lot of money. We received $32.4 million directly, and the possibility up to $11.4 from Norfolk County. So as of today, we've spent most of that money and you have appropriated all of the rest. But ARPA dollars must be obligated, which is now a formal term of art in the rules that is different. We initially thought that meant you could just vote it and it would count as obligated. The federal government produced guidance that said it has to be more than that. You have to have contracts signed, deals in place, really showing that the money is moving in that direction. By the end of 2024 and spent by the end of 2026, you conducted a unique community-driven process that resulted in a plan for how much of this ARPA money would be spent. It's a laudable process that has resulted in a lot of back-end work for both the subrecipients and for us, but it ultimately has led to a better and more inclusive ARPA process. So over 100 separate projects, I think close to 130, are now being tracked across our reporting, which we must make quarterly to the federal government. And now we have come to a point based primarily, I think, Norfolk County's rules and obligations where we have to start, you have to start making some harder decisions about if there are projects that are not going to make the deadline, what to do with them, what to do with the money, and how to reallocate it. This is an initial slate of recommendations on projects that are unlikely to meet the obligation deadline, and what to do with that money, based on submissions received from the departments. We received around $5 million total in requests. I also received clear requests from the former members of the ARPA review committee, which I tried to honor, which was for community-based projects that we're not going to forward, that there be some effort made to try and get that money to be used for the original purpose in question, for the betterment of the broader community. So balancing those two obligations out, or those two directives out, saying, one, these projects that we recommend to you have to be able to be done quickly, but two, that where community money is being reallocated, it'd be spent for similar purposes. We have come up with this initial slate. You can see in the list that there are various projects on the town side that are either not moving forward, or in some cases, fortuitously, we're able to turn back money because they underspent and found money elsewhere. Particularly, I want to give a shout out to the electrification charging infrastructure team, which really did innovative work saving money on these. And for others, for example, the utility debt relief, we did unfortunately run into a situation where we did the legal research. We did our best to try and accommodate the will of the board. But the reality of the situation was we could not legally just issue a blanket debt forgiveness. So what we did was we tried to forgive as much debt as we thought we could legally do. And what that was anyone who was in a hardship status during COVID received a full forgiveness of their COVID debt. And that limited it to the purposes of ARPA, which was recovery for disproportionately impacted and impacted populations, and provided the maximum amount of relief possible that we thought we could legally provide. Even that we were concerned was a stretch, but we feel that that is defensible. And so that's what we were able to do. I will say that it is unfortunate that we're unable to proceed forward with the affordable childcare program. I know that was a community priority. I know personally from meeting with that team that they were committed to that work. But I also, unfortunately, things just got wrapped up in this investigatory process that is still ongoing. And believe me, I wish we were done. My hope is that we will be done shortly. But the reality of the situation is we're just not going to be able to do the work outlined in the proposal. And so we must find alternate sources of alternate means of accomplishing the aims of spending that money. So you can see the full list in there and why it's returning to you. You can also see that, for example, with the bridle path, it's not so much we're taking the money back, but reallocating it more generally so that money can still be spent on that project. And then the ARPA funds just go to a different purpose, a different way of accomplishing the same aims. The childcare funding was split between the Resident Opportunity Initiative at the Brookline Housing Authority, which you can see in the proposal that Michael Alperin submitted, and an affordable childcare initiative that is in development. I believe Mike Sandman is in the process of discussing this with the Brookline Community Foundation. Both of those projects would receive a proposed $450,000, with the remaining $100,000 going towards the mental health services community partnership funding at the Brookline Center, being able to extend that out through the life of ARPA. Then you can see some important projects that we felt could have money spent quickly, big contracts that we could spend money on that are also community priorities. Rodent Control Action Plan, making sure we're spending money there through 2026. The Human Services Assessment that is already ongoing. Money for substance use prevention and intervention. A potential 5-year strategic plan at the police department, PFAS-free response jackets, and for the Council on Aging, to a point raised in public comment. Money to complete the Senior Center Food Insecurity Program. I would also note that money was already reallocated away from the health building to the Senior Center building to complete the electrification and HVAC upgrades there. You previously had voted that due to increases in the project cost. So we are already increasing spending on the Council on Aging, just to that point. There is a certain time of the essence here with regard to projects that may be reimbursed by Norfolk County. The county has set a June 30th deadline for us to get any potential county reimbursements in. Thus far, of our potential $11.5 million, the county has awarded about 5.6 million primarily from premium pay. We have submitted close to $10 million, and by the end of the week, should be above the allocation. But to do that, we need authorization from the board to spend up to the amount listed in these ARPA requests that are marked with an asterisk, so that when we submit to the county and the county says, has the select board authorized this, we can truthfully say yes. And then what we can do after you've had time to digest, after the public has had time to provide you with feedback on this, is to say to the county, we are actually only proposing funding a certain amount of this contract. So if there's money left over in the county's accounts, please fund up to this amount. But if not, please only fund, for example, for the extension on mental health services. Could you only fund $240,000 as opposed to $360,000, representing 2 years of a potential 3-year contract? So that was the explanation of where we are now, and what the hope would be in terms of action tonight would be that preliminary vote to reallocate just on a administrative basis, the bridle path funding and some of your contingency for Norfolk County eligible projects. So Tyler and Nicole can submit those to the county, and then rebalance those figures on the 14th or thereafter, after you have had time to speak to the community, constituent input, and have any questions you have from staff answered.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board?
I have a couple. First of all, I want to speak to the $1 million we set aside, hoping that we would have a viable proposal from somewhere for affordable health care, a sustainable affordable child care. Affordable health care is a whole other story. Affordable child care program. And we've ended up, we spoke to several possible hosts for such a program. There was basically clearly no way to put this together in a way that was going to be appeal to any of those hosts. I have spoken at some length to BEEP, which has a suggestion that would be a fallback, which is simply scholarships until the money runs out. However, we're hoping that something much more long-term, much more sustainable will happen. And in the course of, and what we're doing is having a discussion with one of the major nonprofit childcare organizations in town, which may be able to give us a model that will be scalable to other and duplicable by other childcare operators. So I noticed that there is $450,000 set aside in your latest, and quite. I'm a little concerned about that, because between that and the $450,000 set aside for the housing authority, that's $100,000 short. And I feel like we made a commitment that we should take very seriously. Even though all of it's not going to childcare, affordable childcare, the other $450,000 is going to a wonderful program that the Housing Authority runs that helps people who are Housing Authority tenants achieve economic sustainability. So this is sort of the other end of the scale as opposed to childcare. We're talking about adults. The Brookline Community Foundation ran a program in November at which one of the sort of graduates of this program spoke, and she was extremely impressive. And the whole program was very impressive. And so what happens is that a small amount of money and mentoring, counseling is provided to people to help them basically get their economic lives in organized and move them up so that they are, as the program says, are economically sustainable. In some cases, they're able to move out of public housing, but most important, they're able to achieve some stability in their incomes and do things like get graduate equivalency degrees or diplomas, and put resumes together, create a savings account that they can actually use as a mechanism for paying for education. There are a whole range of things that the BHA does. That $450,000 will support that program for, I believe it's 2 years. So the other 550 that's left out of that 1 million, I'm hoping will go to a model for childcare that is replicable across Brookline.
And obviously, with the board's permission, we can modify these.
Yeah,
accounts,
yeah,
well, you know,
yeah.
make clear where the money's coming from.
Is there a reason why it wasn't in there in the beginning?
The hope was that we would try and spread out as much as possible and try and get, you know, for example, the full funding for, you know, mental health services. You know, there are a couple of other projects that small dollar projects that I wanted to spread out money for across other departments. But in this instance, if the will, again, this is why we bring it to the board. This is your decision. If you want us to spend the full $1,550,000 on that and 450 on the BHA proposal, happy to come up with alternative proposals. That's what this is all about.
Let me just add that I'm actually waiting for a proposal from the Community Foundation, which would be the sort of the manager of the implementing this this concept. We have a couple of different ideas that we're exploring actually, but one of them is waiting on a conversation with, as I say, one of the nonprofit childcare providers. That it's important to know how much money is going to be available so that we can structure whatever we're going to do based on reality. But as I say, my own, very much a personal concern is that we made that $1 million commitment, and I would like to stick to it.
Miriam, did you add your hand up?
No, I think that no, I have something to say, but Paul, I think, was next.
I just, what Regina said really resonates with me, that the lack of reallocation to the senior center. We know that seniors get a pittance of allocation from our operating budget, even less from our CIP. They got some money as part of the first round of ARPA. We do know that there's a significant ARPA cliff coming for them. In fact, the director came and spoke to us and really raised some significant alarms about the fact that, in another year, the budget just falls out from underneath them with respect to transportation and food security and stuff like that. I appreciate there's 50 grand here, but I know that the first place that always gets cut, even from the state, there was some money there that they were going to allocate. What's the first thing you do? You cut the seniors. And so I appreciate Mike's effort to initiate, childcare. I'm a firm supporter of that. Frankly, I wouldn't have been able to go to college if there was not support for childcare when I was younger. But we can't ignore, and we can't keep ignoring seniors. There's a great need. They came to us. I think we cut the budget on painting or refurbishing the building. The place hasn't been touched in decades. So if we're going to reallocate some of that money, I would very much like to see it go into something that has to do with the senior center or seniors.
So I'll just say that Ruth Ann Darbeck, the director of the senior center, submitted one request, and that was filled in full. So I can ask Ruth Ann if there are things she'd like, but everything that COA asked for is in here. And the other thing is that you have already, in terms of reallocating the funds from the health department to the senior center's refurbishment, provided that level of funding. There's also the earmark package you supported, this request you made to the federal government for $1 million in senior center transportation funding, which I went down into an event with Congressman Hockenklaus yesterday in the hopes of getting some FaceTime and demonstrating how important that is to us.
I'm not going to hold my breath on the feds.
I mean, honestly, it's always a long shot with the
It's a
feds,
very long shot.
but we have to try for every source of funding we can. I will go back to Ruth Ann and ask if there are other projects that we might be able to fund.
I think that would be important. Ches, and again, it's just feedback. They did come to the CDBG committee where, more than half of the money from CDBG gets allocated to overhead, which is something we need to look at. But, we weren't able to fund everything that they wanted to do. We weren't able to fund completely, some of the initiatives that we have with Steps to Success. to help, Black and brown students with, summer programs and mentoring and things like that. There is certainly a lot of need in the community that is going unmet. And one of them that we hear over and over and over is seniors are not sufficiently supported. And I happen to agree with it.
Any further comment?
No.
Okay.
So are we going to table to next time or what?
Our request would be if you're willing to do that kind of administrative vote so we can submit projects to the county with the
It's the county
understanding.
things that we use.
Right, with the understanding that you would then reallocate, and we could even, again, this is not permanent. We could always tell the county if you decide not to pursue a project at all, hey, we're pulling this project.
So could we move approval of the asterisk items?
Yes, so I have language on
I thought that was what was
6
going
page of the
on.
memo to reallocate just over $1 million, $1,030,074 from Beacon Street Bridle Path and the Select Board contingency to 9 projects that would be county eligible for us so that we could begin the submission process to the county.
Okay, I move approval then, unless there's further discussion, I move approval of the asterisk items for the county.
It's just described on page 6 of the memo there.
Mhm. Let's see. I move approval of the transfer listed as ongoing efforts. Hold on, let's see. Okay, let me figure out. Oh, voted. I move approval to reallocate $1,030,074 in American Rescue Fund Act funding as follows. And there is a list of items that are covered from the Bridle Path to the Select Board contingency, ongoing mental health services and community partnership funding, ongoing endpoint protection subscriptions, ongoing rodent control action plan activities, ongoing human services assessment contract, ongoing substance use prevention and intervention activities, emergency operations center, backup dispatch equipment, Procore software licenses, fire department radio upgrades, and police department digital evidence ID server. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Miriam Ashkenazi.
Aye.
Michael Sandman.
Aye.
Paul Warren.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Now, with respect to the others, you're going to come back with a proposed reallocation. I'd like to, get a good sense of, what Ruth Ann Dobek thinks, are priority items for the senior center. I'm just a little uncomfortable with the idea that we don't fund the senior center sufficiently, but without specific, details as to what we're missing, or what we're not providing.
Great to get a wish list, I guess.
Will do. Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, next, Netta, change of ownership. We have someone to present that.
I believe the attorney, Jennifer
the
DePazzo
audience.
Gilbert is online.
Yes, I am. Thank you. Good evening. Jennifer DePazzo Gilbert here on behalf of Netta. And if you could promote the other panelists from my team, I can introduce them. Lynette French is here with me this evening. She has been with Netta Brookline for many, many years. Some of you may recognize or know her. She is the Chief Operating Officer. I also have with me this evening Kyle Detweiler, who will be, if approved, the new majority owner with direct control. Also on with me this evening are David Yulian and Charles Alavisetti. They are the regulatory counsel for CDXX and those entities. Also, they don't need to be promoted, but on if there are specific questions for them are Nicole Heisler and Scott Murphy, also from Netta Brookline. So this is a request for a transfer of the 2 licenses and an assignment of the relatively new host community agreement that we negotiated and entered into with the town in December related to the license renewal. The operations will remain the same at Netta Brookline, and the Netta brand will remain the same. The operations team that's in place and familiar with town department heads and various entities working with Brookline will remain the same. The other thing I wanted to mention was that, we had some questions come in from Jonathan Simpson relative to this transfer. And the Friday before the school vacation break, we got the whole team on to answer all of his questions. And I hope that we provided all of the information that he needed. This is also to let you know that and you should have this document, that the Cannabis Control Commission did a thorough investigation. You should have their executive summary and the unanimous approval that Netta received for this transfer and assignment request. In the executive summary, you'll see that the state did background checks on all parties and found no suitability issues. The parties, it was determined, had not exceeded any ownership or control limits. And there was also an organizational and financial inspection and investigation of records, which showed no concerns. The host community agreement that Netta, that we negotiated in December, provides that the town must consent to a license transfer and assignment of the HCA, but the language goes on to say that such approval shall not be unreasonably withheld or denied. This is the third ownership transfer request. We've been before you 2 other times in the past. This is really the last approval that is needed to complete the Massachusetts piece of this transaction. The CCC approved it on April 11th. The town of Franklin, where there are some other facilities, and the town of Northampton have also approved the request. So we're here to answer any questions, and I think Jonathan Simpson said he would be on as well. But this is the third time we've been for you for this type of a request, and available to answer any questions as always.
Thank you. I'd like to start off on an issue that we've discussed before in connection with other cannabis companies, and that is with respect to the so-called other owners who own 64.55% of the stock of CDX Transco LLC, which is 3 steps above the licensee. Are any of those other owners Black or Hispanic owners? An issue that we've brought to your attention many times.
Yeah, I think I will turn that over to the regulatory counsel who's more familiar with these entities, Charles Alisovetti.
Yeah.
If he's on, he can field that one, and then maybe Kyle Detweiler, the majority owner, is also on.
Yeah, so Charlie Alisovetti, and we're regulatory counsel to CDXX in this transaction. So, I would say that, it's a difficult question for us to answer because this is sort of a broad shareholder group, none of whom has control here other than Kyle, and they're all sort of entities. And as part of the cap table, we don't take any we don't gather demographic data, so it's really impossible for us to say that there's this amount of diverse shareholders or that amount of diverse shareholders. Any more than you could say, the shareholders of Google or the shareholders of Facebook, have a certain percentage of, diverse shareholders, just because we don't, we wouldn't, private companies don't ask the shareholders that question. And, even if we did ask them, I don't think that they would feel inclined to respond. So we can't address the shareholder.
I guess my concern is that the cannabis legislation was specifically designed to provide ownership opportunities for communities that had been disproportionately impacted by the criminalization of marijuana. Everyone knew that in the beginning, Maybe we didn't live up to our responsibilities with respect to that issue. But you knew it, and it seems to me that you're now coming to us for the third time with an ownership structure that I can only say excludes the very people that this legislation was designed to protect or to include. I mean, it's almost anomalous that it's like that. So
I tend to agree with you, Chair Green, that the state and local regulations failed. There's no question in my mind that there's not enough Black and Brown participation in actual equity and in actual ownership. That's unfortunate, but I think that what Charles is saying is in this particular situation, because it's such a broad number of shareholders and the demographics isn't collected, we can't really say one way or the other. As far as diversity, I think, and I'm happy to turn it over to Lynette French that can go through all of the DEI measures that are in place, the policies that will continue.
That's a separate issue. We can get to that at a later point. But
and the fact
issue
that
of ownership is what we're talking about now.
Yeah. Well, the courier company, YGP, that is owned by minority, full ownership, Netta partnered with them, and they are a separate company with a courier license, and they act under Netta's license. So there is that. It's unfortunate that there aren't more licenses to give out. There was a state report today that talked about potential legislation to increase the number of licenses. I don't know how that will impact the ballot question that the town voted on to limit the number to the four existing. But, hopefully there will be some changes. But I agree with you that it is a concern.
I guess my question is, when you're pulling together your investor group, where do you go? I mean, is the country club looking for investors, or do you make an intentional effort, or do you intentionally look for diversity of ownership, by going outside the country club? And I know that's that's sort of not an accurate or good way of putting it, but you get what I'm talking about.
I do, and I understand that the town has the same constraints and concerns with their team, and it's very difficult. But I'll let Charles and Kyle. I'll let Charles and Kyle answer how they look for investors.
Yeah, so I wasn't part of the fundraising process for this company, so I can't get into specifics. A number of these investors are people that owned. This is sort of a complicated transaction, but essentially they were lenders to the company, and sort of as part of agreeing to this transaction, they're getting a small equity stake. So, when this company went out and raised money, and I can't speak to this company in particular, but, similarly situated clients, people are pretty, it's very difficult to raise money in cannabis these days. So people tend to spread as wide a net as they possibly can. And there certainly were no restrictions in terms of, other than, the willingness and ability to put in the money. Certainly no restrictions on who is allowed to invest in the company. But I can't.
No, of course not. I mean, I wasn't suggesting that you put restrictions, but just that the outreach to potential investors was incompetent or not sufficient. And I guess maybe what I should ask you is, what type of commitments can you give us that sometime in the near future you'll be able to tell us that the ownership of your licensee or the related parties does have a diversity of participation that addresses the need or addresses the reason why the cannabis legislation was enacted here in Massachusetts. I mean, for example, another cannabis company said that they could issue a certain classification of shares for their top managers, give them an ownership interest. I mean, it may be more limited than others, but it's a first step. But what type of commitments can we get from you so that we have some comfort that we're not going to be in this situation on into the future?
Well, I can't, I don't want to speak for my client and commit to creating an equity incentive pool, but that's absolutely something we would consider. I mean, it's very typical for a company like this to incentivize its management with equity, and that's certainly something that they would consider. I mean, we haven't, gotten to that point where we've defined that, but I would definitely say it would be unusual for a company like this not to have some kind of incentive equity plan at some point.
I mean, one of the problems, Chair Green, is that this deal needs to close.
We're not going to prevent it from closing. I just want to make sure that next time I see you, we're not having the same conversation.
Understood.
Mike, did you have something? I'm sorry.
No.
The other?
I'm paying close attention to the nuances of the discussion. I think it's very listening to the comment that apparently some debt has been exchanged for shares. That's very often an indication of some financial stress, and the exchange is a mechanism for reducing that stress by converting
debt to equity.
Infusing capital.
Basically turning lenders' capital into equity. That is, as long, that's really technically none of our business, but it was interesting to hear.
Yeah,
it might be in terms of the equity incentive, which again, I'm just a lawyer. I can't. I don't want to commit to anything here, but it might be helpful if Lynette spoke about the existing sort of management initiatives of the company, because those would be the people that would be, eligible for incentive equity.
Yeah, I guess, it would be helpful to understand what is the diversity of leadership, management of the officers of the company. Do you have a profile that you could share with us?
Yeah, good morning, members of the Select Board. It's been a moment since I've been back in front of you, so great to see you. I'm Lynette French. I'm actually one of the original operators that started with NETA in 2017, and the proud standing Chief Operating Officer for Parallel, overseeing both NETA still today, as well as our Florida and Texas operations. I wanted to share a couple anecdotes with you that I think may be helpful in this conversation. The first one is I'm currently leading the organization as a female, and in terms of diversity of our leadership and our ability to maintain a diverse leadership team, it's never been stronger as it is today. Of 16 of our key roles that are senior director and above, they are held by women or Black employees in our company. We're very prideful of that. Many of you have seen our journey the whole time, and we're really proud of the work we've done. Still a lot more to do, but the new ownership coming forward and giving us a clean balance sheet to move forward is really important for all of us going forward. I know you've heard a lot about all of our DE&I initiatives before with the local team, but to kind of address some of the inequity that's still existing out in Massachusetts, if you haven't heard about our participation with the BCB Mastermind program, it's something that I'm immensely proud of. We have partnered exclusively with the BCB Mastermind, even in the midst of our restructure. For the last 3 years, we've been the sole sponsor. That program has really spent time doing work with Black and Brown entrepreneurs to not just give them funds, but actually spend time with them and take them through a CEO intensive accelerator program. Two of the people who went through that accelerator program was Omari Anderson and also the better known Drew Ledbetter, who is the social equity applicant who owns and operates the Zeb Boutique Dispensary. We're really proud of the work we've done with that team, because it's one thing to give funding or, you know, pat people on the back or give them support, but to really be a partner with equity applicants so they can actually overcome the barriers, the regulatory challenges, and everything that's in the space so they can actually operate. That's work that we really don't think has been done in the space and is actually crucial to support the social equity and, you know, diverse applicants.
All due respect, that's sort of a separate issue. I mean, it's an important issue, and we appreciate what you're doing, but I think that's sort of a separate issue from what I started out discussing. And while we can come back to that, I'd like to sort of complete the circle with respect to ownership of the companies that are above the licensee. And maybe what I need is someone to tell me that, you know, they will present to us some commitments so that the next time we meet, we don't have to go through this discussion again.
I think we hear you loud and clear, and we'll have to put our heads together after this closing with the new ownership team and bring you something.
Yeah, well, I'd appreciate that.
Bernard, can I follow up to my last question?
Okay.
The question was so I heard 16 women or Black. How many of the 16 are Black?
There's two Black.
Two.
Are we talking about officers?
Yes.
Are these,
That-
I don't know, well,
that
that's
is,
management. Is it,
Yeah,
those
that's what
16
that was my
officers?
follow-up question.
What, there is 3 officers. I'm the
Yeah.
female. Our general counsel is Black.
So of the 3 officers, 1 is Black.
Correct.
Okay. When, I guess this is for Chaz. Chaz, when do we need to vote on this? My expectation was that there were going to be some commitments made to us tonight, that about diversity. I don't know what they were all going to be. But I was wondering if we should just table this until they can come back and make some commitments.
So unfortunately, the reality of the situation is you can't condition the transfer of the license on.
I'm not conditioning. I'm just saying I can't decide until I hear more information.
So we're not able to commit until the deal closes. Charles, if I'm wrong on that, you know, you can correct me.
But yeah, I mean, that makes sense. But I guess I'm saying that next time we see you under your new ownership structure, I'd like to have in our hands some commitment so that we have a different discussion than we're having right now. Mike, you had.
I think the next time is annual license renewal
in December, right?
Yeah, in December, which is certainly enough time for new management to be able to respond in some acceptable fashion. It's not a condition of licensing, but it's something that we certainly can ask about.
Yes.
It's a condition of embarrassment if you don't do it.
Well, I want to just reiterate what Bernard said. You know, this is the 3rd time. It's not a secret, Bernard.
Yeah.
That, I mean, you've been very, very clear about this. I know at least this time and last time that NETA needed to make some serious improvements in ownership and equity. And I'm just surprised that they came tonight without any information, that it's not possible to understand demographic information of investors. I don't know. I think that doesn't seem completely credible to me. So tonight I'm going to abstain, or I would like to table until they can come back and give us more information. That would be my,
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not asking for a condition.
Yeah.
I just think that it would be, we'd like more information about the racial makeup of the investors.
I'm not sure that we can do that. I think what we can do is just make it absolutely clear that we don't want to hear, or we don't want to have the same conversation again in December. Next time we see you. Miriam.
I mean, I don't disagree with Paul.
Mhm.
I guess it'd be helpful if either Jonathan or Joe chimed in. So I'm going to ask Jonathan or Joe to chime in, please.
Certainly.
Jonathan.
Thank you, Miriam. Jonathan Simpson, First Assistant Town Council. I think that Mike's suggestion, I think, might be a very good landing spot for these discussions, because as has been made clear by their counsel, the use of the word commitment implies that someone on this call is going to need to actually have the power to commit the company to something. And until the deal closes, no one on this call has the ability to do any of that. So waiting 2 weeks will only prolong their ability to get moving on what we are asking for. Ultimately, I think it is a situation where the investment participation is been made. It's something that's possibly a priority that was not made clear enough to the new ownership group, but now it has been. But we do, I believe, need to give them some time, and I think the town is best served by giving them the most time possible to start working on this. I understand very well. I have been sitting in meetings where we have expressed to a number of different retail license holders our concerns about this. But while there are some familiar faces here, I would point out, Kyle, as the new equity participant representative here, is new to this, and his group, his team, can start working on this if we just give them a chance.
Okay, Mike.
So I think it's probably correct to say, and I'd be interested in hearing what the representatives of NETA say to this. I think what you're going to find is that a substantial number of investors are themselves corporate entities, as opposed to individuals. And to find out who owns those corporations is a step.
We're not asking.
A step beyond, right?
I'm not sure.
So let's just be realistic about what we're asking for. I absolutely understand the point. And indeed, we have been saying this for quite some time. And so it's disappointing not to have any more than we have at this point. But just the same, realistically, it's not going to be easy to identify individuals.
And we accept that. But that's not a reason not to do something.
Yeah.
Jazz?
Well, I mean, I just want to give amplification to Paul's point, which is right. This is clearly information that the town wants to hear and needs to know from not just NETA, but anyone who holds these licenses. It's not a reason that we could use to deny a license or a license transfer or attach that. But it is something that, as we look to the renewals and think through that process in December, where you have more authority. Again, it's not unfettered authority. License renewals have to be premised on, any additional conditions or so forth have to be premised on good cause. But what you have now is a way to communicate your expectations very clearly, not just to NETA, but to all 4 license holders in town. And to say well in advance of December, when you come back to us, we need to know what your ownership structure is, not just the corporations, but who owns them, and what you're doing to increase diversity in ownership.
So I guess, Jazz, I appreciate that. In no way, shape, or form am I suggesting that under having insight into the diversity of their ownership is a condition of approval or not, right? I'm just saying this evening tonight, I do not have enough information. And I think I'd like to see us table it for 2 weeks until we come back. And I think that would be sufficient time for them to be able to gather some demographic information. Perhaps Mike's right that some of it is institutional. I don't know. That may or may not be true, Michael. We have no visibility into the ownership structure. So, again, this should not be a surprise. I know it's not a surprise that we're asking for this information. I'm just saying I don't have enough information tonight. And I would like more information, and I'd like to wait.
Well, okay, the way I look at this is, they're not gonna be able to give us the type of information with respect to the current ownership structure that's gonna satisfy us. I'm more concerned with getting commitments from them with respect to what they're going to do between now and December when we see them again. A commitment that they will figure out how to diversify their ownership structure. Whether that means dividing up Kyle Detweiler's percentage ownership of Sunstream and Sunstream's ownership of CDX Transco LLC, and finding a Black or Hispanic investor to buy that piece, or something else. I don't really care. I just want a commitment that something will be done by the time we see them next time.
I think that we can absolutely commit to that, prior to, we gather the documents and policies and put together a package probably in September usually. And what we can commit to is once the closure is formed and we have all of the entities lined up, that attempt will be made. And I certainly hope that this message will be conveyed to the other 3 license holders so that everyone is treated the same on this particular issue.
But Jennifer, you know that it has been, because you were at one of the meetings when we conveyed that, and we got some really good feedback from you. So yes, this is not something we're picking on Netta with. This is something that we have and will continue to speak to all the cannabis companies, and we're under pressure from people in the community who want to know what's going on. What's happening? Why has there been no change? And they're right that there should have been change, and we're pushing to get it.
Understood.
Okay. Any further discussion? Anything else you'd like to say, Jennifer?
No.
No? Okay. So I heard that you will, what I heard from you is that you will, once the license transfer is approved, pull together the principals in the company and come up with a commitment with respect to diversifying the ownership structure of your structure.
I think that's correct, and we will owe you an explanation as to how that was attempted and whether it was successful or not, and why. That's what we will do, and I'm sure you'll require every other license holder to do the same.
No, that's understood. Any further discussion? Okay. Thank you. We'll be looking forward to that. Unless anyone objects, and you can abstain.
I'm going to be abstaining.
Yeah. I moved, let's see, what is it we're moving?
Transfer of.
Yeah, I move approval of the transfer of ownership okay, this is a little complex description. I move approval of the transfer of ownership of the licensee to the corporate structure that is set out in the materials in our packet, involving the licensee CDX MA Transco LLC, 100% owned by CDX OpCo LLC, which is 100% owned by CDX Transco LLC, which is 34% or something owned by Sunstream USA, and 66% almost by other owners. And Sunstream USA is 100% owned by Kyle Detweiler. So that is the structure that we are approving. I move approval of that. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Yes.
We're not, sorry, if we could just make it clear in the vote that this is transfers not just the licenses, but also the host community agreement, just so it's clear on the record.
Right. Okay. Plus, we're approving the transfer of the host community agreement. I assume that's to the licensee, which is CDXMA Transco LLC. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Miriam Ashkenazi?
Aye.
Michael Sandman,
Aye.
Paul Warren,
Abstain.
and chair votes aye. Okay.
Thank you very
Look-
much.
Jennifer, we're looking forward to your materials that you present to us.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Okay. Department budget review.
The school
Yes.
department is here in person, and we thought it would, if you'd like.
Oh, no, that's,
Might take them first.
yeah.
Yeah.
Why don't we do that? Okay, let's see, going up for votes. Let's see. The department budget reviews, school budget. So Susan Gibbons, right? Okay. I've only met you once or twice, so I just want to make sure.
So the presentation should be loaded on that laptop at the podium. We would just ask that you share screen on Zoom, so that way it goes out to everyone. And if you see it appear on the projector, you will have done it right. So just pull up Zoom and share screen and choose the presentation before you begin. If you have any trouble, I'm happy to run the slides.
Let me just add, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chaz, that the select board's role with respect to the school's budget is limited. We just want to make sure and confirm that you have crafted a budget that keeps the school spending within the 59% approximately of the town's total revenues, as determined primarily by the town school partnership. So, but we want to know what you've done in your budget.
If you need a hand, I have been blessed with title
I'm
of
also happy to
technical
run the
support.
slides, Susan, if you just want to let me know when I should change slide. I'll only be able to hear you if you speak into the mic at the podium, though.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Great. Yes, if you could run the slideshow, that'd be great, because we're not seeing it here on the.
Happy to do that. Just give me an indication of next slide and I will push it forward for you.
Okay. Let me just close that. Good. All right. Okay, next slide.
Susan, could you speak close to the mic? I think.
And can we just
Is this
ask
better?
folks in the audience folks in the audience, Charlie, Deborah, we ask you to take your conversation outside, please? Thank you.
And my voice is soft. You can hear I have a little laryngitis going on, so I apologize. I'm actually shouting.
The
It may
lead up
not
to
seem
town
like
meeting
it.
will do that to you.
Hmm?
The lead up to town meeting will do that to you.
Oh, okay. Okay. This is just a Brookline thing.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Very good. So we have a few slides for you tonight. We thought we would start, and since this is, can you see now
Yes.
clearly? I'm feeling it. Charles, could you either move the
Yeah, I can move that.
icon with our heads in it so that they can see the numbers? It's off of mine.
Thanks, Chaz. Appreciate that.
It's the faces. Yeah, just shrink it. There you go. Move that.
There we go. There we go. Thank you very much. So we began our process months and months ago, of course, in the fall. And we asked our budget managers to put together requests. And at the time, we had a strategic plan that we were, I would say, maybe 80% through. So people were very familiar with the items that were priorities in that, and had asked them to take a close look at that. And as they were putting together their budget requests to include any information they could that would tie the strategic plan to the educational plan, which then translates into dollars. So as we look to translate it into dollars, our initial budget, when we rolled it up, was over $143 million. And as a team, and that would include all administration, we reviewed those requests and reduced the budget by 500 or $5 million. The budget we put forward to the school board was $642,989, which was above the guideline that we had received from the town school partnership. We were aware of that. And so we engaged in kind of our learning journey process with the school committee to review what was behind that big number. So we spent the next month and a half reviewing information that was in the budget so that everybody have a good understanding. There were some items that we weren't able to move forward because we were already above the town allocation. And so there was a lot of dialogue between the school board and the administration around what we needed and further refinement of our educational plan. In the midst of all of this, of course, we got the GIC information from the town, which was favorable for both the town and the school, and it increased funding for us by $225,000. So when we took a look at the difference between our proposed budget and the town school partnership allocation, it meant that we were about $2 million over at that time. So the school committee made some choices and decisions as they contemplated the options, and they opted to add 2 additional positions at the high school. We were short a little bit of money for our literacy implementation. And then the Pierce School, of course, will be splitting to 2 separate locations from a single location. And there was some staffing implications that we wanted to be able to attend to. So the total sum of additions was $318,000, which increased the gap. And then there were some other budgetary reductions. One of the things that we did to try to mitigate the impact of transportation was to go out to bid. The bids came in early March, and we were able to reduce the amount of money that we had in our budget by $100,000 for that. There were also some ways that we were able to leverage our grants so that we weren't changing really our educational plan, but rather just how we were going to fund it. So I always say that the taxpayers ought to be the court of last resort, not first resort. And so if we can leverage grants to accomplish some of our goals, that we should do that. And so we were able to move some money that was in the operating budget off to the grants. So when we looked at those type of adjustments, we were able to reduce our budget by about $400,000, which left this revised gap is still around $2 million. And the school committee asked the administration to provide them with a list of potential reductions, and the administration came together and put together a list of options for the board to consider. We presented them in order of recommendation, and the school committee, after several meetings of dialogue, made some decisions around what we would be reducing out of our educational plan. And this included the reduction of literacy coaches, as well as some secretarial positions, and the big item that really most folks are focusing in on is the world language K-5. And so the total that was reduced from there out of our original proposal was the $1,908,944, which brought us to in balance and in alignment with what the town school partnership agreement allocated for the schools. Next.
By the way, that's a very helpful chart.
Thank you. And so really the highlights and the work that has taken place, which is, I think, what you asked as we opened, was this that appears on the slide here. So the school committee and administration worked together with input from the town and developed a 3-year strategic plan. My understanding is that the school district has not had a strategic plan in a number of years. to guide improvement efforts. And so this was a major body of work that took place this year. And because the strategic plan had not been adopted in time to prepare the budget, but we did have an eye to it, you won't see some of the direct connections that we'll be able to make next year because the document wasn't completed at the time that we were preparing. But nonetheless, the work was done and we're really excited about it, and it has informed a lot of the work that's taken place this year and is a huge part of the thinking that was behind how do we make choices as we're moving forward in the development and creation of our budget. The school committee provided us with priorities as well, and one of their top priorities was to maintain class sizes within the guidelines that they established, which is 22 students at grades K through 2 and 3 through 8. 25 would be the max. And so we look really closely at those class sizes and provided the school board with a lot of data and analysis on that. Also, as most of you know, at the high school, our class sizes were significantly higher, especially in AP and upper level classes this year. And so they gave us some pretty clear direction that they wanted some course correction there. In the original budget that we proposed, it had 5 additional staff for the high school. And then, as I mentioned in the opening slide, the school board added an additional 2. The high school had initially requested 10. An estimated 10 would be what their preference was when we went through the enrollment analysis. So we had an enrollment study done this year, actually 2. And when we took a look at that, there was some adjustments made by the high school for a final recommendation of 7. So the other item that's really driving a lot of our work right now is the introduction of a K-8 ELA curriculum. We don't have an adopted curriculum in ELA at this time, and next year we have funding to implement the K-2 component of that. So we would introduce the K-2 component this year, and then next year it would be 3 through 5, and then middle school level the year after that.
What does ELA stand for? Okay. Thank you.
English language arts.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can't hear you well from over here, so.
Oh, I'm sorry.
English language arts. That's what that stands for, English
For
language.
those of us who aren't steeped in educational culture and lingo.
I will call that out. I will not use edu-speak. How's that? So yeah, English language arts curriculum.
We won't always have our educational person on the select board.
Yes.
It is literacy essentially.
Literacy. Yeah.
Okay.
Get it really down to the basics. Literacy.
Okay.
Yeah. And of course, last year, as part of the override was commitment to move BEEP to a full school day program next year, with an understanding that it would have a 0 net impact on the operating budget, and that is true. But it is a highlight, and a lot of work has gone into planning for BEEP moving to the full day program. So that's a highlight for this year. And then last is we're piloting the middle school Winthrop House, which will be housed at Driscoll. And when we were in the midst of planning for the Pierce School, this model was going to be part of when the Pierce School was completed, that we would start the middle school Winthrop House. However, we do have some students with needs, and with Driscoll opening, the school board felt and the administration recommended that we begin the Winthrop House programming at Driscoll this year, and then once Pierce opens in a few years, then we would transition that program over to the Pierce School as initially planned. So those are the district highlights for the FY25 budget. Next slide.
Can I just ask, do you know
Sure.
what Winthrop House is?
I was going to ask that. Thank you.
Yeah. Winthrop
I don't
House
wanna
is.
interrupt her.
I have a slide on
You,
it.
I mean, you could answer it, but Winthrop House is essentially an in-district therapeutic program for kids who have higher needs than can be served through a regular special education program.
Okay.
Yes.
Is that an accurate description?
Yes, yes. And these students are typically serviced in an out-of-district placement. So we're, yes. Okay. Okay, so if we can go one more slide, we can talk about Winthrop House and then we'll back up to the ELA curriculum. Great. So this here's the slide kind of explains the mission or the purpose behind the Winthrop House, or the concept that the mission is to provide identified adolescents with a therapeutic education at an earlier age and stage, one that fosters the building of academic, personal, and interpersonal skills. There is a program at the high school right now, and I think we have 32 students that we serve there. And so this is would be more like a feeder program. So if the students with similar needs are identified earlier, and we can provide the supports, then as they move up through their learning journey, they have a high level of skill, so their ability to access other opportunities is greater. So that's really the kind of theory of action behind introducing it at the middle school level.
Susan,
So
can I ask
the
a quick-
decisions.
May I ask just a
Susan?
quick question about it? Just a quick question. So in addition to it being a great program to help support students that need that, there's also, I thought I heard you say it keeps them in district.
Yes.
With no way they'd have to go out, which is, there's a cost differential there, correct?
Yes.
Do we know what the cost differential is approximately?
So on average, we say that the cost of an out-of-district placement is about 100,000. And so
And in district is,
is less, but at a certain, but you have to have a certain volume of students in order to hit the break even. So this we're going to introduce in a two-phase component. Next year would be phase 1, and the following year, phase 2, with the idea of having about 10 to 12 students served by this program when we have it fully operational. So next year, we're looking at 4 to 6 to introduce that and refine like the curriculum, the processes, the support systems that are necessary so that we're in a position to be able to invite more students back in.
Yeah, how many out-of-district students do we have currently?
Approximately 65.
Wow. That's way
and
more
the,
than
and
I
the,
thought.
and the few that you mentioned, you're going to start with 4. Would those 4 normally, would those have gone out of district and you're keeping them, or?
My understanding from the Deputy Superintendent for Student Services that there are 2 that are in out-of-district placements, and there's several that are in district that would have otherwise been placed out.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And just so you know, we have Winthrop House at the high school. Right? So it already exists at the high
Bringing it
school.
up.
They're talking about bringing it down to middle school.
Approximately 32 students at the high school are in the Winthrop House program currently.
Thank you.
I think, I wonder if I can just give a little history, because the effort to keep students in-house is something that was a pretty substantial effort going back several years, and we managed to reduce the number of outplacements, and it is $100,000 a pop. That's disrespectful. $100,000 a student, and excuse me, that was successful. And yet, what tends to happen is you have, first of all, you have an increase in student population. You have different students, different issues come through. So it's a constant battle to provide in-house as much as you can.
Can I piggyback on, sorry, just to say that no matter what, there will be some subset of students that will always need, we will not be able to provide for them the education they need in terms of therapeutic needs.
Okay.
Yeah. but we try to provide learning opportunities in the least restrictive environment, and certainly keeping them in the community has so many other advantages that, where and when we can, we do. So this is an exciting new initiative that we're introducing this year. And I also want to say that this is in the first year is being fully funded through grants. So it doesn't have a budgetary impact on the operating budget, but again, what we're presenting is our educational plan. Funding comes from a variety of different sources. The biggest one, of course, the taxpayers in the community. Eventually, Winthrop
excuse me.
House will transition over to the operating budget in time, but the early implementation is going to be funded using the IDEA grant in the upcoming year.
Okay, that was my question.
Okay. So the other thing, and we're really excited about this, is the introduction of the new ELA curriculum. And of course, it's exciting for a lot of reasons, but as we look to address some of our literacy needs, especially closing the gap, having a curriculum that is clear and is horizontally and vertically articulated across the grades allows us to be able to evaluate learning experience for kids and to introduce an assessment, a common assessment across our schools so that we can identify when kids are succeeding and when they need additional supports and what kinds of supports they need. The ELA curriculum and the multi-tier student support system are probably our two most significant educational initiatives that we have moving forward from this year until next year. And it's really about how do we provide kids with quality learning opportunities that meet the needs of all students in the least restrictive environments. So we want students, even with tier one learning gaps, to be able to be supported in the regular education classroom. And if you have a strong MTSS program, you'll have fewer kids that are at your tiers 2 and 3 levels, right? So our focus is really on those two areas in the upcoming year. And there's been a lot of professional development that has been included in this year, as well as in next year's plan. So, and the other, big important piece here is that that the OTL department, Office of Teaching and Learning Department, has really been looking at best practices and evidence-based research to identify what practices are really addressing the needs of our students and which ones should we be transitioning out. So it's not just a matter of coming before you and saying, we're asking for more. We're actually asking for different. So there's some things that are transitioning out of what we're doing and other areas where we're transitioning in where we feel that we could strengthen the programming for kids. So I think that is my last slide, but I will let, yeah. So there is a slide here on world language. Some folks have asked, why this particular area of our curriculum? Why is this an area where we are reducing? And so right now, there is a huge push in the state, and rightly so, on literacy, because as we know, literacy provides students with opportunities in all areas. So the stronger your literacy skills are, the higher levels and of coursework you can take. Also, and it doesn't matter in what area you pursue an interest, right? You have to have strong literacy skills in order to be able to navigate in most any field today. And so this is a strong focus area in our state, and here where we did not have a curriculum that had been adopted, this will certainly strengthen our literacy program for all students. So in order to be able to introduce the literacy program, you have to have a certain amount of time to introduce the learning units with fidelity. And there isn't enough time in the structured day to be able to provide our core subject areas with the amount of time necessary in order to be able to implement the core content for all students. And so as you look at what are the core subject areas, they're math, science, ELA or literacy, and who did I miss? Social studies. And so, world language is not a core subject area. And we're not able to even at this time provide enough time on learning to really master world language skills at the lower level. So in general, most of the schools at the elementary school are offering only 20 minutes 3 times a week. That's not enough time in order to develop the world language skills to allow students to become, at some point, hopefully bilingual. And so without enough time on learning in general, and really we're not in a position to expand the school day without a significant investment of time, staff, and funding resources. The K-5 World Language Program was the program that was not we weren't able to maintain as we focus our attention on these other core areas. So I've kind of talked about all of those items. And so summary and closing. Yeah. So our budget is within your allocation, not yours, our allocation, town school partnership. The focus of our decision making, again, centers around our strategic plan. And so as we're vetting, what stays and what do we need to shed at this point, we keep referring back to what our focus areas are in the strategic plan. And of course, we continue to improve our budget process. That's been a priority for the last couple of years. And we're hoping that in some small way, the process seemed to maybe a little more transparent and understanding to others. And we certainly have a list of recommendations for how we can improve that further moving forward. So that's our presentation for you tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions, Paul?
I just have a quick comment and a question. First, my comment is, as you may know, I have 2 children in the Brookline Public Schools. I have a kindergarten student and a 4th grader at Lawrence. And I just want to say thank you to the administration and to the school committee because it is a wonderful experience, usually. And it's a great education. And we are, my family is very pleased to be able to participate, and we appreciate all the work that Dr. Guillory and the administration and the school committee is doing. I know, you guys have a line for public comment that's often much longer than ours, and I understand how your meetings go, but I just want to say thank you for all that you do. I do have one quick question about BEEP. So BEEP, we've talked about BEEP being budget neutral, the expanded program, but the leases are still paid out of the CIP, out of capital funds. Is that, so it's not completely cost neutral because the leases aren't coming out of the operating budget. Do we have a plan to move BEEP leases? It used to be called capacity expansion. I forget what it's called. Are we going to move that into the operating budget at some point, or?
So let me point a point of clarification. So I have heard this spoken of in different ways since I've been here, which has only been 5 minutes, right? But that people say that BEEP is going to be cost neutral, but everybody's kind of defining that a little bit differently. And I think that there's not a consistent understanding about what BEEP is. So BEEP is really a 2-pronged early childhood program. One prong of it is really a mandatory program for students on IEPs. And so within that program, you need to have a certain number of peer students in order to develop a comprehensive program. Then in addition to that, there's an early childhood program that is like really kind of, in many ways, I would say, unique to Brookline, where you have actively gone out and for many years had an early childhood program, kind of separate, that you charge tuition for. For the students on IEP program, you don't charge, obviously, tuition for kids on IEPs. And in most school districts, you charge a very, the rate of tuition that you charge for students attending that, the complementary students, peer students, is usually less than what a private school would charge, a private early childhood center would charge. The only reason why I say all of that is because there's not going to be a time where if you looked at the total expenses of BEEP, that it would ever be cost neutral, because we have mandatory obligations for that. That said,
So let me say this.
Yeah.
Maybe my question was not, I was inarticulate.
Okay.
The expansion of the BEEP program
okay,
is cost neutral. Let me qualify it that way.
okay, all right.
So I should have said that specifically. I apologize.
No, okay, that's good.
And so the expansion, we've increased tuition, so we're covering costs there.
Correct.
Right, which is where the operating budget comes, but we've also added additional capital CIP money to cover the leases, because now you're having more time, correct?
Yes.
And so we are taking from capital to fund the leases, and my question is, do you anticipate when we might wean ourselves from that capital infusion?
Yes, that has not been part of the dialogue through this year's process, but I'm sure, given some of the interest in it, we would take that up in the upcoming year. But I also want to say that the increase in the lease is $77,000. It's the cost of leases have always been paid through the classroom capacity grant, which is part of your
It's
capital.
not a grant, it is capital. But anyway, I don't want to beat a dead
Yeah.
horse. AC,
The
this is not news, but
$77,000,
advisory's been on.
yes, is an increase on the capital side, and it is not being borne by the revolving fund as the staffing increases to implement that.
And at some point it should be, correct?
If that was the agreement, I would say.
Well, I don't know if it's an
engaged.
agreement.
I don't know. I wasn't here
All
for
right,
that discussion.
I'll leave it for now. Well, this will be
Yeah.
next year's planning session.
Miriam.
Well, I'm going to first echo Paul's thank you. And I think everyone knows I'm a big fan of the schools. I have 2 kids in high school. We've been in the school system since both my kids. My daughter went 2 years at BEEP. At your very last slide, the very last bullet was we're kind of working on adjusting the budgeting process. And I think one of the things I've learned on the select board is controlling the narrative is important, like really getting ahead of how the conversation moves. So I'm just curious, to me, it felt like while the budgeting process for the schools was effective, it was a narrative that got away from you a little bit in terms of how are we going to make these cuts? And so it became a narrative about what are we cutting rather than what are we funding? And so I'm just wondering, as you think about how you do your budgeting next year, how you might think about that approach and that language. And I just put that out there for you to contemplate. Am I making sense? Because you look at me like I don't know. I don't want to be confusing, but there was I was at a lot of those meetings, and there was a lot of talk, very painful talk about what's being cut. And I think again, when you come out with a budget that is beyond what you have versus maybe starting lower and going up, you change how people see the process. So that is something I think worth discussing as you decide how you do budgeting for next year.
Very well.
I concur. I concur.
Okay. Any other questions from the select board? Great. I appreciate the presentation. It an improvement over previous years. Good.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. We could talk more about it later too. I think, yeah. Superintendent Gilroy knows what I'm talking about.
Okay. Let's go back to the capital improvement program.
We do have a hearing at 7:30. We do this one first? Budget
It's
first?
7:25.
Might as well,
Let's take a 5-minute break and come back.
I don't mind doing debt and CIP now. I'm just curious what the board would like to do.
Okay, we can do it now if you'd like to do it now.
Might as well do it now.
Okay. We're good to go, I think.
Can't take more than 5 minutes though, I assume. Yeah. But. you know,
Okay, give me just a moment to pull this up.
Which warrant article?
Warrant articles. I'm sorry. The budget, the amended budget with AC and.
That is a public hearing?
Yep.
Yes.
The budget
Article
amendments
five.
is actually to the current year budget.
I'm sorry, the current year
So
budget amendment.
Those are two amendments that came through sort of very recently. I'm not sure if they're in your packet or not. But we'll get there. So I'm presenting tonight in lieu of Melissa, who is having to go to AC. So I'll be talking about the capital improvement plan, our interest this year, and the unclassified budget. So let's dive right in. So as you all know, the capital improvement plan is a 5-year plan. It's always developed within the parameters of the CIP policies, and I'll just plug that the CIP policies are available on the Budget Central page on the website, and they're in the appendix of the budget book, or on the appendix page if you're in the digital version of the budget. If you're ever curious about how the CIP gets structured. And so for this year, for the 5-year plan that we have this year, it's calling for an investment of $182 million, which is about $30 million per year. There's a focus on deferred maintenance in the schools and with our roads. The $4.67 million recommendation in the town administrative financial plan for school repair and maintenance has been modified by advisory committee at this point, has been amended rather. And so has the street rehabilitation. It remains to be seen how that will turn out, but we're fully funding as much as we can using our 6% of prior year net revenue that comes from the operating budget and using free cash to get to a total of 7.5%. And we used additional free cash to get up to 11.2% operating funded. And that's a 18% as Melissa's slide points out when exclusions are included. Here's an overview of the major projects in the capital improvement plan. So again, if you, I'm not seeing roads on here, but again, that would have been modified by AC. And so I'll just leave these up for a minute for folks to digest. We can come back to this if we'd like. But these are the major projects being funded in the CIP this year. Again, we're talking about this 7.5% CIP funding policy. This is 6% of prior year net revenue, as I mentioned before, plus free cash to get to the 7%. The 6% policy is broken down by a debt finance goal of 4.5% and a property tax finance goal of 1.5%. And then the remainder to get to that 7.5 is free cash funded. Here's a breakdown of how free cash is being allocated in the FY25 budget. You'll note that there is here's the breakdown of the CIP policy. Each component. But the main takeaway here is that the amount that we have available for special use is around $12 million. That breaks out. This is sort of over and above the policy, because as you can see, the top half of this table breaks out the operating budget reserve, the unreserved fund balance / stabilization fund, usage. And so the bottom half is the 12 million we have for additional special use, and that's going into the IOD trust fund, into pensions, OPEB, and the accrued time trust fund. And there's additional for the CIP. That's an additional $7 million we have in the CIP this year. So we had, as you can see, we had a fortunate number of 25 million for our free cash certification this year, which is again another year of a very high free cash number, which is great. We can put it into the CIP, but as folks know, that's not guaranteed each year. So here's the
Charlie, you don't say.
Yeah, flip back to that. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry, we had a You had something in the way. No problem. I'll leave this up for a second, but essentially, if you look at this 25 million free cash certification, the top half breaks down how our policies use some of that funding. There's 12 million left after that goes into the special uses at the bottom. So I'll leave this up for a minute, and just so folks can digest. Okay. So moving on,
Excuse me, Charlie.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, maybe I'm missing something, but we have $1 million for OPEBs. I thought we cut that $1 million to OPEB, or 500 to OPEBs and 500 to the reserve funds.
Right. This is I think this table comes from the financial plan. So you are correct that has been modified since then. If you look at the TM tables that are included in the packet, I can pull those up if need be. There was a change to well, I think 500,000.
That's all right. I just wanted to confirm that was old. Those are old numbers.
Actually, I think if I'm not mistaken here, yeah, with 500,000 out of pensions into the stabilization fund. So that has, yeah, that's correct. That has been updated. Any other questions before I move on?
Yep.
Okay. So the revenue finance component of the CIP, this is basically the $6.1 million of the CIP that is coming from the operating budget. The remainder is from free cash and other available. So these two components comprise the revenue finance portion of the 7.5% CIP policy. So here is a breakdown of our debt service, our debt and interest budget. And you'll note that there are two columns here, the original financial plan figures and the FY25 adjusted figures. This comes from borrowing 1.2 million more than we had originally anticipated for the fire stations, which is excluded debt. So it increases the property tax portion of the budget, or I'm sorry, it increases property tax, the total property taxes, I apologize, by 85,000, fund the increase, the difference. But this has no impact on the operating budget because this is excluded. So I'll leave this up for folks to look at for just a moment. But the essential takeaway is we had a higher amount in principal than we had anticipated, a lower amount in interest, and the 85,000 is the net increase to the property taxes since the financial plan was released in February.
Yeah.
The excluded from what, I guess is my question. Is it being excluded? Hang on just a sec.
Okay, sure.
Is it being excluded from the 2.5% limit, or that's almost the way it sounded because it was being passed into the tax base?
Exactly. So the two methods for going over the 2.5% increase that is allowed each year are the override and excluded debt. And so this is excluded from the property tax levy. So it doesn't impact our ability to go up by 2.5%. If it wasn't excluded,
all right, got it.
It would soak up some of the 2.5.
Right. I mean, this is when you pass a debt exclusion, right? I just was mystified by the
phrase excluded debt. I know it is. It's a different way of thinking about it, but this is our debt service budget because the fire stations were excluded or were passed by a debt exclusion. Increase doesn't impact the operating budget, which is within the 2.5% levy or increase plus override funds that were passed last year. It is separate from that. Still causes an increase in property taxes just outside the levy.
Right.
That makes sense.
Got it.
Okay, let me just point out that bond anticipation notes, $100,000. That's the Austin settlement.
That is, that actually is a good question, Bernard. I'm not prepared to answer on the spot. I would say that, bond anticipation notes are used as short-term debt to cover when it's not necessary to borrow on your long-term debts. So for example, if if you only needed short money to be able to do some work on a project before you did a longer term portion of your borrowing, you could use a bond anticipation note, which has, it's basically a short-term debt to cover short-term expenses that can be less expensive than using your long-term debt, for example, because it's short-term.
We did use those on Alston, but they not exclusively on Alston. They've been used in other projects.
Exactly. So if, for example, a project is set to begin in earnest in a year and it will require borrowing a huge, going out for a huge chunk of the full debt exclusion, we might say, well, let's do a bond anticipation note in the short term, because we only need 100,000 or so, or some small amount to get us through the next year. So their bond anticipation notes are essentially a short-term debt tool that we can use.
So the Alston settlement was initially a short-term bond anticipation note, and then it's taken out by long-term borrowing?
That might be the case, yes, Bernard. I mean, I would have to ask Melissa to just be absolutely sure that I'm answering your question correctly.
Yeah,
but
okay. I just wanted to point out that
initially.
We have that liability.
That settlement is still on the books.
Well, it's still on the books. I wasn't sure if it was, it must be a long-term debt at this point, Bernard, yes. Okay, any other questions on debt and interest at this point, or on the overall budget for debt and interest anyway? Okay, so this is the last slide we have. This is the unclassified budget, which refers to several miscellaneous items that we have in the town side budget. As you can see, the major changes are, from over FY24, we're seeing a 14% increase in insurance. This is regular rate increases plus attempting to bring the values up on some of our buildings, in particular school buildings, to match replacement value as we're seeing it now. There's no change in the cost of the audit or in the contingency fund. The liability and catastrophe fund is being funded at a lower level. This is essentially a policy level where we attempt to keep the liability and catastrophe fund at a certain point. And so we didn't need to invest much this year. And then you'll see, this is where you'll see the stabilization fund change reflected. Initially, this was a $2 million budget, but we have since decreased pensions in order to increase the stabilization fund in accordance with some recommendations that we got from bond counsel. From Moody's, essentially telling us that we really need to bolster our reserves. And so we're at a point now where we're funding it at 2.5 million. And then the remainder is what we have put into the reserve fund for this year. And that's broken down here by property tax and free tax supported level. So that is the, I guess, a quick run through of the CIP, the debt and interest budget, and unclassified.
Can you put that last slide back up, please?
I sure can. One moment. Get that back to where it was.
Yes.
There we are. Feel free to chime in, Jazz.
Okay, Miriam.
I have 3 questions on this last slide.
Okay.
Sorry.
Oh, what?
You need the mic.
Oh, I have 3 questions on this last slide. One of them is just genuine curiosity. The other, so we have passed a warrant article reducing the need to print warrants. So I'm just wondering, did that not impact the $50,000 that we spend on printing warrants? Or are we just being conservative in maintaining the $50,000 budget? I'm going to ask all 3, and then you can just answer all 3, if that's okay. I'm very curious of the general insurance, 14% increase in insurance. If it were health insurance, I'd say that's typical of the problem of health insurance. But is it health insurance or is it something else? No, it's something else. So I'm curious as to what it is. It's what?
It's property insurance.
Property insurance. Oh, wow.
It's driven by new school, increased values, so forth.
This is a multi-year effort, Miriam, on the purchasing office's side to attempt to bring the values that we are insuring buildings at up to a more appropriate level. There have been some buildings identified that are underinsured. We've been trying to do that at a sort of stepping it in each year rather than doing it all at once. And so this is FY25's crack at that.
Got it. Thank you. And I don't actually remember the 3rd question. So if you could
I'll
just
answer
talk about the printing.
We can talk about the first one. Chaz, were you going to chime in on that?
No, go for it.
Okay. So as far as I'm aware, this budget we are keeping where it is because it lives in the town meeting budget, and we are still uncertain about costs associated with hybrid town meeting at this point. There is certainly room in this printing of warrants and reports. We saved some money this year on printing the budget book, which also lives in this account. But my understanding is we've been hesitant to bring it down because it also balances against their other town meeting accounts. And I think even including other town meeting costs. And so the logic has been to hold it where it is until we're more certain of new hybrid town meeting costs. That is I think that's a fair point though. And I would, I guess I would, failing the history, failing having the history in my head, say, yeah, that does make sense that we should revisit that at some point.
Great.
Any chance you remembered your third question?
No, but I think Paul has a question.
Okay, great.
Yes, I called.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
And this may be for Charlie, you or Chaz. So the reserve fund, does that include the change that we have been talking with about advisory, about moving 100,000 in there for IEP modifications?
I will double. Go
One
ahead, Jim.
moment. I might be able to pull that up. If somebody else has another question, let me take a look.
That's a good.
So the short answer is that should be reflected in the budget tables in what we're going to be discussing later about the
Okay, it
potential.
may not be here, but it will eventually be.
Yes.
It'll get there.
Yes.
Bingo. Thank you.
In the reserve fund, hold on. I actually can give you this answer. I just need a moment to pull it up. So the additional one more moment here. I just have to double check the two tables we're working with. The 100,000 is not included here, Paul.
Okay, so we're going to talk through that when we start.
When we talk about the final version of the budget, that your proposal, yes.
Okay.
Any other? Go ahead, Charlie.
I was going to say, any other questions? You're way ahead of me.
That's exactly what I was saying. Any further questions from the select board? Okay. Thank you, Charlie. It was very helpful.
Yeah.
Now,
Okay, next, and that included the unclassified debt and interest, right?
Yep.
So we
Yes.
don't have to do that.
Correct.
Warrant articles, public hearing. This is a 7:30 public hearing. And we start off with budget amendments, but why don't we do the CPA appropriation first so that Nancy Heller doesn't have to stay till the midnight hour or whenever we end.
Thank you.
and we have that presentation loaded on the laptop as well, Nancy, but if you'd like, I'm happy to run the
Wait,
slide.
I'm sorry, say it again.
I was just going to say we have Nancy's slideshow loaded on the podium laptop, but I'm happy to run the slides for her if she would just let me know when to go to the next slide.
Okay, so I just want to make a few remarks. First, and then I'll ask you to put up the slides. Okay, I'm Nancy Heller, as you probably know. Town meeting member, Precinct 8, and Chair of the Community Preservation Act Committee, known as CPAC. And I want, first of all, to thank some people because of their participation in our working groups, members of the CPAC, and working groups, meetings, perseverance, thoughtfulness, robust discussions, their determination to conclude our recommendations for funding the projects before us. We had our final meeting today at 5:30, and so we're ready to make the presentation now. You do not have all of the materials that I will be presenting. I have a warrant article explanation, which will be sent to Melissa tomorrow, and I will include a copy for each of you, and you can read through it. And it's much more detailed than the presentation I'm going to make tonight. I figured you didn't want to spend a huge amount of time, but I wanted to educate town meeting members in our presentation about the CPA, what we did this year, so that people will understand it better and know what to expect in the future. I also want to thank Lindsay Butler, who's been our staff person, and she has done an excellent job shepherding us through our process, researching CPA issues, developing reports and other materials we've needed. And the other person is David Lescoyer, who's here tonight. There he is. He's really put his significant knowledge of CPA into action and work for the committee. He's been writing and editing reports, warrant articles, participating in the working groups, responding to members of the community about issues. And I want to thank him, and a hearty thank you to all of the members. Tonight, we're going to ask you to support the recommendations that CPAC is making for funding of 11 projects. And before we get to the specifics, I want to show you a chart of the revenue. And Charlie, I would ask you to put the slideshow up now, please. The revenue that has flowed to the CPA account over the last few years. Okay, so this, as you know, this is our first year of making the grant recommendations, but we've been collecting money for 3 years for fiscal years 22, 23, and 24. And you can see in the first year, the figure on the left is the total revenue, and then it's broken down into the categories that we need to account for. Those are 10% of the money goes into each of the categories. Reserve, so open space, recreation, housing reserve, historic preservation reserve, each get 10%. There's an administrative reserve, which also gets 5%. We did not have that the first year when we were still hiring staff and getting the committee together. And then the remainder is what's called the budgeted reserve. It's not allocated for any one particular category. It can be used for any of them. So that goes on for fiscal year 23, fiscal year 24. And at the bottom, Charlie's words are getting in the way here, but you can move that. But that shows you the totals of each of the that's totaling the 3 years of Community Preservation Act. So this year, in other words, we have in hand $9,596,959. That's on the left. Then the 995 in each of the 10% categories, 356,850 in the administrative category, and the remainder in the general budgeted reserve of 6,255,109. Let me explain that especially for anybody who's watching this, that you already, in town meeting, already appropriated these amounts. The amounts come into the general cash account of the town, and then the town meeting appropriates them to the CPA account. So in that sense, you've already appropriated them once to the CPA account. Now, what we're going to be doing is taking some of that money and appropriating it to the individual grant applications. But I also wanted to mention the other thing we are going to be doing. Next slide, please, Charlie. Next thing we're going to be doing at town meeting, if I can just get this piece of paper here, sorry, is we're going to be appropriating fiscal year 25 money. This is money we do not have yet. It's an estimate of what we're going to be getting in the fiscal year that starts on July 1st. So again, we'll be taking this, the treasurer will be taking this money from the general revenue account of the town, general cash account, and moving it into the CPA account when it comes, if it's appropriated by town meeting.
So Nancy, I'm sorry. So we'll appropriate it, but we're not going to allocate it. Is that what?
You're not going to, well, you're not going to do a second appropriation of that to grants because we're not using this money at this particular spring to fund any of the projects. We're going to be using this money for next year. So we will always be, if you will, ahead of the cycle, which is a good thing, actually, I think, in the long run, because it gives us, we have a more precise number each year, because every year the number changes. The tax surcharge is 1%, and then we get a boost from the state, but we never know exactly what that is. Now, for instance, in fiscal year 23, we got over $1 million. But this year, in fiscal year 24, we only got 500,000, those are round numbers, of course. So it varies considerably, and we don't know what we'll get. The other thing that varies is the interest we get on the money. So that's calculated by the Treasurer's Department and again, deposited in the CPA account. Okay. Could you move on to the next slide? So you can see that we will have we were estimating $3.5 million for next year, in addition to what it will be left over from this year. So I mentioned this before, but I also want you to know that you're going to be getting the detailed explanation tomorrow with background about the CPA, the constraints of CPA, the process we used, how many projects, et cetera. And I don't plan to go through this at this stage, but at the town meeting, I do want to educate town meeting members about the CPA and how it operates, because there seem to be quite a bit of misunderstanding about what it is and what it does. Okay, so now we're coming to the individual projects, and I've broken them down into the three categories. First is the community housing category. And this turned out to be our most expensive category because the number one project on the list is the High Street development, redevelopment project. And this is the one that was part of the MBTA-CA warrant article from last November. And we've allocated 3.75 to this project. It's matched by the Housing Advisory Trust. And they still need to raise a considerable amount more money. But because we're putting in this money and the town is committing 7 million in essence to the project, they believe that that will help them get the state monies that they need. One of the critical things for CPA about this particular project is that it will provide about 100 new units. The plans are not actually set in stone, so I can't tell you the exact number, but that's considerable. That is really a lot. Most of the projects that we've seen coming through are, 6, 8, 10 units. And so 100 units is very significant and we thought it was worth the money, especially in this year when we have it. So why don't if you have any questions about this project, why don't we answer the questions as we go along, just so we don't lose what we're talking about. If anyone has any questions.
Mike.
Yeah, so if the town is contributing $7 million and there are 100 new units, that's about $70,000 per unit that's coming from the town. Construction costs or rehab costs or whatever the costs are tend to run higher than that per unit. Where is the rest of the money likely to come from?
Well, the BHA knows that better than I do. But I think it's a lot of state grants, HUD, that kind of thing.
And low-income housing tax credit.
They're projecting now they need a total of 75 million, but don't forget that some of that money will be for renovation of units that already exist.
Right.
That's not something that the CPA is going to be, we were expecting our money to be spent on the new units.
Okay, thank you.
Paul?
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. So this question probably applies to all of these on the list. Is there any time frame that is associated with the money? When does it need to be used by? Similar to what we've done with, ARPA money and also CDBG money. There's a time frame.
Yeah. Well, loosely, we like to see the money spent within 2 years. I think that's not realistic for this kind of a project because it's so huge. So we don't have an actual time frame. We will be, one of the things that we will be doing for all of the projects is to have either a grant agreement if it's an outside agency or a memo of understanding if it's a part of the town. And those will lay out the requirements, deed restrictions. Every project that touches real estate will need some sort of a deed restriction.
And it will include a time frame that the money needs to be used, or would take.
Yes, we'll talk with the BHA and see what's reasonable at that point.
I guess I'm less concerned about because this is, the BHA's High Street's a huge project, right?
Right.
It's some of
Huge.
the other projects that we may be helping to
Correct.
fund, renovations, preservation, stuff like that.
So,
In any category.
so we would negotiate with them what's a reasonable time frame.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions about that one?
Nope, go ahead.
All right, so the other BHA project on the list is the Egmont Street roof repair. The Egmont Street has several roofs which need to be replaced. And because they're at risk of future water damage, they already have some water damage. There's 6 3-story buildings, 120 units. So this falls into the category of preservation of housing and preservation of affordable housing, which CPA is very much about. It's a capital improvement, but it has to have a meaning under CPA language and constraints for the purpose of preservation is really, and there's a chart that you'll get tomorrow and you'll see. It's kind of confusing, frankly. I've had to study it for many months and now I'm finally feel like I'm facile with it, but it lays out all in the different categories what can be achieved. And for instance, the only support that you can render is in housing, but in all of the others, it's acquiring, preserving. Historic preservation, you can't create it, but open space you can, that kind of thing. So at any rate, these roofs at the Egmont Street project have reached the end of their useful life. And so this phase 1 will replace 2 of the 6 roofs, and they do have a match, I believe, from, I'm not recalling where that match is from, but state funds, I think. So it meets many of our community housing goals, obviously, the 500,000. Questions on that one?
I guess I have one. So Nancy, the roofs, and this is just for education for me, this type of maintenance would normally be funded by the state, correct? I mean, the state has done a miserable job.
Miserable.
At maintaining public housing, right?
We all agree on
that. And they're not doing it.
Yeah, we all agree on that.
Yeah, but typically this would be, we're picking up where the state's falling down, correct?
Well, yes, but on the other hand,
It's necessary. I'm not
we
questioning.
can't let it fall. Now that supposedly Governor Healy has some funds but we don't know what's going to happen and when those are going to be actually.
But you think there's matching funds that are coming from the state?
They are, yes, apparently they're going to have a $500,000 match from the state.
Okay.
And then they'll be going to they may be applying next year and the year after for another roof next year and 1 year after, because they have 6 buildings and we're only doing 2 this year.
Okay.
So, okay. So, the next one, housing assistance, is in the support category that I was talking about. And this is a program, the applicant is the Brookline Community Development Corporation. The amount is $232,375. And it's going to essentially it provides assistance on behalf of tenants to landlords. The money is given to the landlords for rental payments for in arrears tenants who meet criteria consistent with laws and policies, especially like emergency funds for people who perhaps have lost a job or have poor health issues, etc. But the Metro West Collaborative Development is going to be hired to disperse the rental assistance funds directly to the landlords. And in addition to that, the BCDC will provide other forms of assistance, including counseling and education about landlord tenants' rights and responsibilities, homelessness prevention, financial planning, and good rental practices. So that breaks down as rental assistance is $172,000. The face-to-face counseling is for $34,575. The Metro West payment processing for landlords, $25,800. The total is $232,375. Okay?
Any questions about that?
All right, let's move on. The Boylston Street Preservation Project is also Brookline Community Development Corporation for $1,192,439. This is a project on Boylston Street, 154 to 156 Boylston Street. Since it was not acquired or created with CPA funds, we can only fund projects in this instance that preserve or protect the property from injury, harm, or destruction. Therefore, the project will only focus on preserving the existing affordable housing units that are at risk of future water damage. We are going to remove and replace the windows and installing thermal and moisture protection matched with ARPA funds. So this is going to protect the envelope of the building. And it, it's, I think, a very worthy project that really needs to be done. Steve Hyken recently joined our committee, and we put him to work immediately by analyzing the budget and figuring out that in the end that this seemed to make sense. The other thing I want to say about these projects is that they are all projects of reimbursement, meaning the grantees will need to provide invoices and documentation of how the money is spent. The money is, we don't just turn over the money. So we'll work on that and have that and that'll be a piece of the memo of agreement. And our staff planner, Lindsay Butler, whom I mentioned before, would be in charge of working on this and making sure that, number one, these are approved uses for the money that we have provided, and number two, that it's within the budget that we have laid out. There's no going over budget in this situation. We're hoping that it will come in at a smaller amount, but there's no going over. It's not a situation like that. So the other project, the last one in the housing category is, unless you had a question, sorry, I ran over that one.
So wait, are you going to go through each category and each of the
Yep,
projects?
each of the projects. There's two more slides. Sorry.
Okay.
Well, you have to vote on it, so I assumed you want to know about it, unless you'd rather just take my word for it and vote it
No, this is
on my.
hearing. We could vote next week or
You don't meet next week.
next meeting.
You don't meet this week, and the combined reports deadline is this week.
Yeah, so
Yeah, we're running up against
we
it.
want to vote.
Well, no, I will decide that.
No, I was just,
Okay.
I'll try to be quick.
It's not drone on.
Okay.
That's.
I'll be really quick. All right. So Beacon Street Preservation, this is a 100-year-old building, 700, also the Brookline Community Development Corporation, $766,721. And again, this project will focus on the exterior of the building, work on the envelope, thermal protection, and replacement of fire protection system. And that also is matched with ARPA funds.
Okay.
All right, so the total in this category, you'll see on the slide, $6,441,535.
Sure.
Okay.
I do have one question, Nancy, and I didn't mean to
Okay.
bounce here and keeping you moving. So essentially all the money, if you go back, could you go back one slide, is allocated between two entities, the Brookline Housing Authority essentially, and the Brookline Community Development Corporation.
Yes.
34% of the funds. Did we have any other applicants?
We
for
did.
Housing?
We did.
And
So we had a few other applicants, and in the process of determining, taking a deeper dive into eligibility issues and whether they meet the requirements of a CPA, we found that some of them did not. And so we lost 5 projects. We had 16 to start, and we lost 5. So we did have at least one other that I can think of it off the top of my head that was a housing project.
you had 16 housing projects?
We had 16 projects in total,
Okay,
and we have 11 now
okay.
that we're recommending.
But a bunch came up because they weren't.
Yeah, there were issues. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Okay. The next category is historic preservation. And The All Saints roof repair is the first one on your list. That's All Saints Parish. That's the one on Beacon Street. Beautiful old building on Beacon Street, a corner of Beacon and Dean or Corey, one of those. I think it's Dean. It's for 800,000. They also have a problem with their roof, and they're going to be matching this with money from, they're going to be using their endowment to take out a loan, and also if they need to, but if they're doing a lot of fundraising, and they're hoping to be able to match it completely. It's a $2.8 million project overall. So, and the important point on this one is that no CPA funds will be used to restore any part of the building with any religious significance. That is in keeping with statutory and case law and the anti-aid amendment. Okay?
Okay.
Short enough for you, Bernard?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, the next
I
one
wanna
is.
stop on the same day that we started.
Yeah, and wait, not the next slide. Please go back. I'm not finished with, thank you, Charlie. Okay, the Devotion House window repair of 65,000. This is obviously, you know, of this building. It's Edward Devotion's house, sits in front of the Ridley, formerly Devotion School, and the windows are in very bad shape. So they're being revamped. And obviously, this is also critical in upholding the historic characteristic of the building. And it meets our goals. And so the last one is the Lars Anderson historical cultural landscape. And that one is split between two categories, between open space and historic preservation. And so the total for that one is actually $100,200. But out of this particular, we wanted to show that it's actually being split between the two categories. Hold on a second, I've lost my space. That one is, sorry, too many papers here. All right, so that one is the historic land survey of the landscape report of the historic landscapes and structures that need restoration or rehabilitation. And it's going to cover the Brookline Reservoir Gatehouse, Fisher Hill Reservoir Gatehouse, Lars Anderson, Emerald Necklace Bridges, Old Burying Grounds, and Walnut Hills Cemetery. So we anticipate, this is a study, obviously, and we anticipate that they'll be coming back to us for additional funds in the future years. So the total for this one is $915,100. Could you move to the next slide, please? Okay, this is the open space. So the first one is a very, very modest project, but very necessary, which is the removal of invasive species at Hall's Pond. It's going to be carried out by the Friends of Hall's Pond. It's $3,500, but a lot of the work is being done by the volunteers. The system, I think, is a technique called tarping, which is where they tarp over the invasive species in the hope of killing them permanently. So our funds are going to be used for purchasing materials and supported with in-kind donations and funds from the Friends budget. If this works and it's a successful pilot in terms of the tarping, then they'll probably want to do it again because it won't cover the entire Hall's Pond.
Are these invasive animals?
I'm sorry, I don't hear you, but
Plants. Okay.
yeah, invasive plants, yeah. The DPW and Parks and Rec have submitted a proposal on a tree inventory, $328,030. And that one is going to be assessing the inventory is going to assess Lars Anderson, Fisher Hill Reservoir, Brookline Reservoir, Emerson Garden, Mason Square, Knivet Square Parks. And it's going to identify tree removal and structural pruning and where we're going to need to plant trees in addition. So it's a very valuable climate measure. I'll keep going until you tell me to stop. The Public Health Plaza at Brookline Village, 193,500. This is on the land in front of the borders Harvard, excuse me, Harvard Street. And there's a large area of land and they want to put a pocket park there, a seating, tree canopy, and with native shrubs and pollinator plants. They're working with to get some in-kind contributions and promote climate equity. I'm working with DPW on this project. The last one is the cultural landscape, which I already told you about, that was funded 50% out of historic preservation and 50% out of open space. So the total for open space and recreation is 575,130, and the total appropriation for all categories is almost 8 million at 7,931,765. So those are the projects, the CPA recommended projects that we're asking you to
Approve.
agree with our appropriations. Do you want me to go on to fiscal year 25? That's a separate budget issue.
Separate budget issue, and this is a public hearing, so I want to open up the public hearing first. Oh, Mike.
Right, I do have a question. As you may be aware, Nancy, the ARPA grants are if the work doesn't go forward or something isn't completed, the money reverts back to the town and gets recycled through another grant. Is there any provision to do that with these grants?
Yeah, well, as I say, if a project doesn't use all of the money,
Right.
You're appropriating, it comes back into the CPA account and we'll use it for another project.
And it's the town who's handling the funds, or in some cases it looks like the town, in some cases it looks like some other agency?
Well, if it's another agency, it goes back to the other agency.
That's my question. Okay. It
I
remains.
mean, the ARPA funds would not come back to CPA. The ARPA.
No, forget ARPA. Sorry.
Okay.
I may have confused you by saying
Okay.
something about ARPA. I'm just I'll give you a perfect example for funds that are going to the Community Development Corporation. If they don't spend all of the funds, then what happens to that money? Does it remain with the agency or does it come back?
No. Well, it's never been given to the agency until they submit us invoices.
That was my question. Thank you. So we are administering it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's an invoice paid kind of program. You know, we don't just turn the money over to them at the beginning of the fiscal year.
Right.
We wait for the invoices to come.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. And then we reimburse.
I
That goes for all of the projects.
And I apologize, Deborah, for using that as an example.
Hey, come on, move on. Okay, this is a public hearing. I open up the public hearing. Charlie, anyone on the Zoom? I see we have a hand raised here, but we'll check with Charlie first.
Yeah, so let's take the comment in the room. For folks on Zoom, if you'd like to make a comment after that person, please use the hand raise or Q&A feature to let us know that you'd like to make a comment. And these are 3 minutes, right, Bernard?
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. Regina, do you have your hand up? Okay.
Thank you. This looks wonderful, Helen, all these projects. What I'd like to bring to the attention, one question is about the matching. Does it mean if somebody doesn't match, do they lose any of the money you were willing to give it in the first place? It could or it might not. Okay, good. That's question number one. And what I want to ask is, how does my precinct which is the only precinct in the whole town of Brookline who doesn't have a pocket park for our kids. How do we get on your radar screen? How do we do the application process? What would it take? Because at my stage of life, I would like to leave that legacy, as will a couple of my town meeting member colleagues feel very strongly that they'd like to leave it, even though our kids would not be using it. How do you get help from your committee to start that process? Thank you.
Okay, well, the first step would be to contact, identify land that you would want to put a pocket park on and figure out who the owner is. And then if it's the town, you would want to work with probably Parks and Rec or DPW. If it's a private owner, you would want to work with that person or company. And then you would, we will hold some information sessions over the summer, and we would really want potential applicants to come to those, or at least one. We'll probably hold one for each area. And then you submit in September an eligibility application, and we make sure that the project is eligible for the money. And if not, CPA is a grant program, but it's a grant program with many strings attached. So we have to make sure that you're going to measure up to all the strings. And then you'll be invited, if it's eligible, to submit an application and to the committee. And then the committee would start a process of reviewing the applications, coming up with the recommendations as we're doing now. And then it would go to town meeting in the spring. Town meeting only has 3 choices. It can approve the recommendations that the CPA has put forward. It can deny the recommendations. It could reduce any recommendation, but it cannot increase any recommendations or initiate any projects on its own. Okay? And so you can email Lindsay Butler at brooklinema.gov, but you need to identify the property first. That's your first step. Right.
I see Susan Park has her hand up. Is there anyone on the Zoom? Charlie?
We have 10 attendees and no one is using the hand raise or Q&A feature at this time to let us know they'd like to make a comment.
Ms. Park?
Oh, sorry.
Hello, thank you. My name is Susan Park. I'm a town meeting member from precinct 17. I have a question. So Amory Park is, I think, going through a study right now, and they're going to be working on it. And so I'm wondering if the town is doing a study on Amory Park, can we also apply for grants in addition to that? Or do we, because it seems like the town's doing something now, but if citizens also have ideas for grants, do we do the same process as what you just explained to Regina? And then I also have a comment.
So if you want to submit an application as an individual and not the town, but the town is in control of the property, you would need to have a support letter from the town saying that they agree with what you want to do. But there is another string here, which I haven't mentioned before, and that is that if the town has already plans to do like this study, it's already allocated the money, CPA will not replace already allocated municipal funds. So the town is going to do a study of Amory, the CPA couldn't do a duplicate study. That would not make sense. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I just have, excuse me, I just have one more comment. So I saw on the list there was a tree inventory. So something really interesting happened to me this past weekend. A gentleman approached me as I was campaigning, and he said that there was a cherry tree on John Street. It's the intersection of John and Green, and he had hit his head, he hurt his neck, he was in PT for a month, and really was distraught because there were a few other people who, you know, did the same thing. One even had a concussion. So I reached out to, yes, this is what I was told. And so I reached out to Erin Shute, and she was very quick in replying. And actually someone came and to like really, I guess, to cut the branch, because this was a problem for, I guess, other people that could have the same thing. And then there was someone in the neighborhood who was complaining very vocally that this tree is so beautiful. It's an adult tree. The blossoms are gorgeous. Like, you can't cut the branches. So I guess, like, for this tree inventory, my comment is these beautiful weeping cherry trees, you know, we have to put them at a place, you know, when you plant them, when they reach full maturity, knowing that these branches are going to be flowering and cascading down, we can't put them right next to a sidewalk where, you know, they're going to cause injuries. I grew up with 4 of these weeping cherry trees. Okay, sorry.
Is this related to the CPA committee?
Oh, is it not? Okay, sorry.
I was just about to let Susan know that this is not a CPA issue, actually. It sounds like this is a tree under the purview of Tom Brady, who's a town employee, and Aaron Shute in DPW. So the tree inventory that I mentioned is focused on the parks.
Right.
And so it's focused on what we can do to weed out those trees that are damaged and need to be replaced.
Okay. Charlie, anyone on the Zoom who would like to speak? I don't see any hands raised in the audience, so.
Yeah, no one else has raised their hand or used the Q&A feature on Zoom. We have 10 attendees and no one's using those features at this time. So it doesn't seem like anyone is looking to speak.
Okay, so I'll close the hearing. And unless anyone has any questions, I'd like to call for a vote. Miriam.
No, I'm ready to vote.
Oh.
That's my ready to vote. Excuse me, Bernard.
Yes.
I just want to mention you're voting on 2 different things. You're voting on the applications, but then you're voting on also the fiscal year 25 appropriation, moving the money from the general fund cash into the CPA account.
And those are both encompassed under the CPA warrant article. So if they were to vote favorable
Yeah.
action on that,
Yeah.
that's what they'd be.
Yeah.
Yeah,
on
it's
the
the
CPA.
warrant article that's on our agenda.
It's on the warrant article.
Yeah. Okay. So we just have to vote on the warrant article, which is what we're saying.
Yeah.
So I move favorable action on warrant article 11, fiscal year 25 CPA appropriation, which includes the allocation that we just heard about. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Miriam wants to say something quickly. So
Aye.
Mike Salmon,
Aye.
Paul Warren.
Aye.
And chair votes aye.
Compared to mine.
Thank you, Nancy.
You already said it for me. You said it 3 times.
Okay, next, fiscal year
We drew a bell
24 budget amendments. This is the current fiscal year. It's not next one.
Correct.
And there's some budget amendments to sort of correct or I guess adjust some spending.
Yes, Charlie, you want to take those?
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair Green and Select Board members. I'm here to talk to you about Article 5, which is the FY24 budget amendment. Looks like Melissa is back. I'll promote Melissa. And if she would like to take it, she is welcome to do so.
You've been doing a great job, Charlie.
Thanks, Bernard.
Not as great as Melissa. She's listening in, but
I know. She put her hand down. I thought she was going to let me do it there for a second. So, you want to talk to her, Melissa?
You're right.
Sure. So Article 5 is the budget amendment for fiscal 24. We had filed this knowing that we likely would need this for the golf course because we had a very, very rainy beginning of the year. And we knew that that would probably mean that they would be having some revenue issues, which indeed they were. In addition, with the change that we are doing to sustainability, having that now in DPW, we are looking to transfer some funds to support the position for the remainder of the fiscal year. So there are just two motions that we are looking for the board to vote. So let me just pull up my screen. Oh, I need screen sharing privileges.
You have them.
Thank you. So for the golf course, I met with them yesterday, and even though it's early in the season, they still feel a little bit of optimism as long as the weather holds out. But to be conservative, I think that they are looking to allocate $400,000 from their retained earnings. If they don't need it, it'll just stay within the fund and go back into retained earnings. So this first vote here essentially is amending the article that originally had golf in the Article 7 of the 2023 annual town meeting. And it just adds a line here that allows for a transfer of $400,000 from golf enterprise retained earnings. And then the second piece of the vote of the motion is to amend the fiscal 24 budget in order to reduce the planning budget by $25,000 and then add that amount to DPW to support the sustainability director position.
Okay, any questions from the board? Oop.
We
Hey, this,
we
pardon
did
me?
get, we did, those did get emailed to us if you want them.
Right, right. That was well explained.
Yeah.
Yep. So this is a public hearing, so we'll open it up for a public hearing. Charlie, anyone in the audience like to speak?
Yeah, so folks in the room can raise their hand and someone will call on you to speak. And folks on Zoom can use the hand raise or Q&A feature to let us know that you'd like to make a comment at this public hearing. And I'll just give that a few seconds, Bernard. And no one in the audience is using the hand raise or Q&A feature to let us know that they'd like to make a comment.
Well, in that case, I'll close the public hearing. Any further discussion from the select board? Okay, Charlie, could you, pardon me?
It seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah, Charlie, could you put up the language that we need to vote on? Because I can't find it in my materials.
I got it.
Okay, the first one is, okay, I move that the town amend Section 6 Golf Enterprise Fund of Article 7 of the 2023 Annual Town Meeting. So it reads as follows, and I will just reference the language in the materials with respect to the Golf Enterprise Fund. It results in the total cost of $2,517,574 to be funded from golf receipts and a transfer of $400,000 from golf enterprise retained earnings, with $260,238 to be reimbursed to the general fund for interest costs.
Indirect costs.
Pardon me?
Indirect costs. Those are the benefits.
Oh,
for the
indirect costs. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, any discussion of that? I move approval as I stated it. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Miriam Ashkenazi.
Aye.
Mike Sangwin.
Aye.
And man, Paul Warren.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. The next vote is amend the, is there anything below the chart there?
No.
Melissa? Okay, so I move that, any discussion of this? Okay. I move that the town amend the fiscal year 2024 budget as shown below, with the adjustment made to the personnel budgets in each department, as indicated in the chart in our materials, with respect to the Planning and Community Development Department and Public Works Department. Let's see. Any question or comment? I move, let's see, where am I? I move approval of what I just said. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Mary Mashkenazi?
Aye.
Mike Sandman?
Aye.
Paul Warren?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. And I saw something in the chat, so let's see if I can find that.
Don't think so.
Okay, something came up from Helen.
No, that was when Melissa was sharing her screen. She got an email.
Oh, okay.
That was my email. She was asking if you had voted yet.
Okay, all right. Okay, so those are the public hearing articles. Let's go to the articles we discussed in the past. We have two articles, warrant articles to vote on. Warrant Article 10, fiscal year 25 budget, and warrant Article 17 with respect to police details. Warrant Article 13, we're going to defer to after the advisory committee takes up that article and an amendment and maybe other amendments to it. Any discussion on warrant Article 10, the fiscal year 25 budget?
I have a comment.
Okay.
And then probably lean on Melissa. So last week, we were presented with a number of amendments that were suggested by the advisory committee's land use subcommittee, capital subcommittee, sorry. And those included, they moved some money around with respect to where money was located in a prepaid kind of maintenance for schools, deferred maintenance bucket. And they reallocated some of that money to various line items. They had, I think they were moving to zero IEP modifications. It was like $200,000 there. There was a condition, I believe, placed on parks, Monmouth Park and Griggs Park. And then there was a condition placed on the appropriation for money for Lars Anderson that had to do with preservation, involvement and review. And then there was the Baldwin School, where there was a reduction in funds to, I think, 180,000 restrictions that the work only be done on the first floor, not the basement. And there was also preservation review. Melissa, correct me if I'm wrong, but we did some marathon conversations over the weekend with the chair of the advisory committee and members of the capital subcommittee. And I believe we're in agreement on moving the money around to various line items, which Melissa probably has. We agreed to move the 100,000 from the IEP account money into reserve funds. So if the schools do need to come for IEP money, they have to go through the advisory committee for the reserve fund. We agreed to the Lars Anderson. I'm saying Mike and I actually worked with this. I'm speaking on Mike and I. And I think we agreed on the condition for Lars Anderson. We agreed on a change in how they were wording the restriction on money for the parks. And that was agreed to. And so I think the only area of where there's a gap has to do with Baldwin, and where, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're recommending 275,000 and change for work to complete some work on the Baldwin School, which would allow the Clark Road lease to end and staff to move over there. I think we eliminated the restriction that the money can only be spent on the first floor, which means we're allowing the schools to go into the basement and do some renovation work there. And we did, I think, retain some language that was suggested by one of the subcommittee members for preservation involvement. I think that's where we ended up.
Right. And sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, the one place where there may be disagreement, we think the only place where there may be disagreement between the advisory committee and the select board versions is on the funding that is allowed to, funding for Baldwin to the extent that it's allowed to go into work in the basement.
Right.
That's the last.
And maybe the amount of money, they might want to stay with the 180K. So
Right.
There's a little disconnect there.
Right. So there's a potential $90,000 difference there.
And I guess the other thing I'd say, Bernard, real quick, is that there's also one other, we put some restrictions also on money that the schools have projects identified. And if they find that they're under on a project and they want to move that extra money to projects that's defined, they would need to come through the select board as with any contract approval amendment with, I think, notice to the advisory committee. So, and is the package, Mike?
Yeah.
I think they've got 98% of what they
Yeah,
wanted.
exactly. Yeah.
Right. It's
hopefully they'll agree that that's enough.
Yes.
I just have a question. The preservation, the restriction, or not restriction, but the condition with respect to the Preservation Commission, that remains?
It remains.
The question is, does the Preservation Commission have authority over that type of
No.
project? What, so we shouldn't.
Well, it's, again, the advisory, certain members of the advisory committee disagree. And so that language is in there so that if ultimately a determination is made that the law does require it, then that will happen. But currently the determination is that the law does not require it.
And the way it's worded, it was greatly softened, I think, based on the original language. So the language now says, provided that such renovations, upgrades shall be subject to the review and recommendation from the Preservation Commission. So, it actually doesn't say approval. It says subject to review and recommendation. So it's more like an advisory capacity, which I think is reasonable.
Can I just, and I think I have to ask Melissa this, but what exactly is the change with the line item for the IEP funding?
So I think it might be good if we could just kind of go through where we are and then I have a budget table that has everything marked.
Oh, good. Okay.
Then we can talk about each item as we get to it. I think that the advisory committee right now is debating everything. So we have proposed language. We have where Mike and Paul thought that the board would likely go. But we won't know the outcome for the advisory committee unless they take it in the next 5 minutes. So,
They go even later than we do.
From our last meeting, so this column here was what we had talked about with advisory committee and what they voted. Their operating budget has been voted. Their CIP has not been voted. They're currently debating their CIP right now. So I'm just showing the changes from the operating discussion that we had talked about, but we didn't know where they were going to land with it. There was 5,000 additional voted for veterans. There was 3,680 voted additional for Council on Aging. The Minister and I thought that was such a minor adjustment that we would just recommend taking it out of the collective bargaining reserve. So if the board votes on that, we would be aligned with the operating budget. In terms of the CIP, one of the things, or before we finish the operating budget, IEP, Paul mentioned the adjustment of $100,000 coming from free cash to additionally support the reserve fund. That money would be coming out of the roadway account. The schools had reallocated a substantial amount of money that was originally programmed for school deferred maintenance and instead put a lot of it into the roadway maintenance. I think we described that last week in the PowerPoint presentation. So that's where that adjustment would be coming from.
Wait, can we back up a second? So they took money out of the schools and IEP and put it into roadways, and now what's
Okay, so let me see if I can. Okay, so there was 200,000 in IEP.
Yeah.
And that was really, a swag by the schools.
What do you mean swag?
A scientific wild ass guess.
Thank you, Michael. So it was and they actually don't have any specific numbers. So and this was done in real time at 11:45 during the advisory committee the other night. They agreed to have that money put into the reserve account.
Okay.
So that just like anything, if something does come up, the
Right.
school department can go to advisory.
Agreed or AC agreed or everybody?
So this is my understanding. Everybody has agreed to this,
Okay.
except that the schools have agreed to the Baldwin pieces in the IEP, but whether advisory agrees or not, we don't.
Advisory has voted the IEP adjustment for the reserve fund, so that is taken care of. It's just the CIP items that have not been.
I'm sorry, Melissa, will you repeat that? I'm not hearing you very well.
Sure, the advisory committee has voted on the reserve fund allocation for IEP, so that they did vote that earlier tonight.
Okay, so I guess my question is, so we're having the advisory committee Advisory Committee second guess the schools on whether accommodations for kids on IEPs should be made?
No, this is really a question of where it should be funded. These are items that typically have been funded in the operating budget. They were requesting a CIP item because they felt that it was more of a capital expense. That was debated at the advisory committee about whether or not these were permanent modifications or temporary. Given that it was extraordinary and unforeseen, that's how people drifted to the reserve fund, and that's ultimately where it was decided to fund it.
Okay, Mike?
So a couple things. One is that in the past, I think the total amount that's ever been required for this sort of thing was on the order of $50,000 plus or minus. And so one question was, why $200,000? And they were talking about, well, forward funding it, basically. And the other was the issue that it's an operating expense, not a capital expense. So the agreement was to put $100,000 into the reserve fund so that if it's needed for something that isn't, because these are all unanticipated expenses. If they were anticipated, they'd be in the budget. So they're unanticipated expenses. They're appropriate for a reserve fund transfer. I will say that the history of the school committee coming to the reserve fund is that they really have been very reluctant to do so. And I'm actually quite pleased to see that there's been a sensible resolution of this issue in this way, because it is sensible for unexpected expenses, unanticipated expenses of this nature to come out of the reserve fund, but just unanticipated and extraordinary expenses, and that's where the IEP stuff fits.
Okay. Anything else, Melissa?
So just to kind of catch up, so the items in orange on the budget tables here are the adjustments that the advisory committee is currently debating within the CIP. Most of these are taking funding that was originally, we had originally had 4.6, almost $4.7 million funded in advance for deferred maintenance in the schools. The advisory committee chose to reallocate that to other areas of the CIP that also have deferred maintenance issues, most notably the street rehab. And most of this recap is for Miriam, who I'm realizing missed the meeting where we initially covered this. And so all of these orange adjustments are items that they're currently still debating, but we think this is likely where they will end up. And really the main issue is around the school rehab account and the funding there. And so if I pull up the conditions of appropriation, then we can talk about the different levels of funding for the school CIP. Okay. So let me, we had originally had 2.983,675. 2.7 of that is for projects that were on an identified list that has been vetted by both the capital subcommittee, the school committee, and essentially the message in sub-bullet A is stick to the list. And if you deviate from the list by school, you need to go to the select board and provide notice to the advisory committee. That is the language that has been proposed by Paul and Mike. I am hearing at the advisory committee, they're still debating this. I think Harry Friedman is likely to going to have an amendment that requires not notification, but approval by the advisory committee. So you should just be aware that that's something that they're considering. Then we have this Baldwin sub-bullet B. And so with Baldwin, there are three different amounts being talked about. 275, 675 was a number that we got last week from the building department, I think in response to some of the questions and the modifications that the advisory committee were indicating that they were looking for. Ultimately, that number got further refined by the capital subcommittee to $180,000. And that is intended to complete the electrification needed for the building, to finish the renovations of an upper floor bathroom, and then to provide general cleanup, but nothing more than those three items. And so you also should have received a memo late breaking this afternoon from Susan Gibbons, who is requesting that the amount actually be $309,675. So those are kind of the areas that I think are still going to be hashed around, both with advisory and if you have any questions on what you'd like to do here as well.
Okay, Mike?
So with regard to the change from $275,000 to $309,000, our advice to the school department was, please don't do this. We've settled on 275 as a compromise number. And I believe I'd be speaking, well, I'll speak certainly for myself. Paul can speak for himself, but I think we're in agreement that our recommendation is to stay with the 275.
Yeah, so I'm comfortable with the 275. Advisory, there's some folks on advisory that don't want it to go above 180, right? Because they don't want the school to go into the basement. And that prevents them from going into the basement by by limiting the funding. But I'm comfortable with the 275, and if they, there's contingencies in these numbers and enough to move around if they have to do something.
So what are we going to vote on? And are we able to vote?
So you have in your packet a draft conditions of appropriation where all of the changes have been highlighted, whether it be the additional language placed on Lars regarding preservation, the additional language placed on Griggs and Monmouth related to abutters and design review, and then you have this additional language for school rehab. So the budget table also provides the changes. We can vote the operating budget. That's probably the easiest one for you to get in alignment with the advisory committee. And then you can talk about whether or not there are any additional changes, or whether or not you want to accept the items that are in this Word document that are still being debated currently by the advisory committee.
So Bernard, I can speak for myself. I'm comfortable voting all the changes that Melissa just presented to us. I think that there are some folks on advisory that, just have a different view on Baldwin. I'm comfortable with it, us having a different view. I'm not in agreement that the schools for a project level item operational project item have to go to AC for approval for change in funds. I think they're just going too far beyond kind of their responsibilities. And I don't think that's necessary, especially if the schools have to come to us and we're going to approve it through a public meeting. So I'm comfortable with this language. And, we're going to be chasing our tails with advisory all night tonight if we're going to try to do that. I'd suggest we vote it.
Mike, what's your view?
I am full agreement with
Miriam, what's your view?
That's fine. I'm in agreement.
Okay, so even if I didn't agree, I'm outvoted. So,
What do you not agree with, Brian?
nothing.
Oh,
Theoretical.
So even if you were disagreeing.
Yeah, hypothetically,
right, but you don't. Good.
And I think the fact that they're debating this right now, I think it would be, I would vote this first so we can send it over to them and not let them keep circling the drain, so to speak.
Okay, so I will move favorable action on Article 10 fiscal year 25 budget as amended by who amended? Let's see, where did
So I would say as amended by the advisory committee,
by Melissa,
further amended by Select Board Member Warren and Sandman.
As amended by the advisory committee and then further amended by Select Board Members Warren and
okay. As Chaz said, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Miriam?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Okay, next, we're not doing accessory dwelling units.
Sorry, can I just raise a question about that, Bernard? I know that we discussed with the proponent an amendment to that when we reviewed this. Honestly, I'm prepared to go ahead and vote on the amendment or consider the amendment and vote on the article, as opposed to postponing it and having another probably identical discussion.
Well, the idea was to wait until advisory does whatever they do. And, based on that, we told Linda Pelkey that it wasn't necessary for her to appear at tonight's meeting.
And we told
So-
Roger he to come to.
And Roger too.
All right. Well, if we made that commitment to the two of them, then okay. Yeah.
For the record, I support it also.
Yeah.
Since I
Support
won't get
what?
to vote on it. I support the warrant Article 13.
As amended?
No, it's not amended yet.
Without
Not amended yet, so no, but I support it as is, so I'd have
Okay.
to see but I don't get a vote, so it doesn't matter.
Okay.
So
Okay.
strike that from the record.
Yeah.
No, the
Okay.
reason why we left this on the agenda was that if you had comments or ways to guide advisory in the process, that you could do that without running
Well,
afoul of the open meeting law.
Yeah,
Well, then I'll express my opinion that the article as it was originally proposed is what I would prefer.
Yeah, that.
So I have very serious concerns about investors being able to purchase moderately priced single-family homes in Brookline, converting them into, luxury units with potentially an ADU that might be at 80% AMI. I had a long chat with the proponent, Roger Blood. He had Rashid do some legwork, and the new, thought on this is, well, the investors aren't going to be able to pencil this out anyway. And so they're going to make these modifications, and then they go sell it to a homeowner, and then you'll have an owner occupied ADU. I think we're making a big mistake getting into turning more of our real estate over to speculative investors. I'm a huge fan of owner occupied ADUs that help people age in place, bring in children, grandchildren, support if they need it to age in place, or even just to have a unit to help make that housing affordable for somebody. But converting our moderately priced, and there's not a lot of moderately priced housing in Brookline at all, into luxury units, I'm not a fan.
Okay, so one of the
Sorry.
issues that I think advisory is going to debate and hopefully come to some conclusion is the issue of whether this warrant article as written in fact is going to be well, let me rephrase this. The problem is that the bond bill in the state legislature will trump anything that we do.
Right.
And the warrant article as written attempts to do a workaround around that by requiring an investor-owned an investor to have perpetual deed restrictions on the property. And whether that's a workaround of anything that comes out of the state is, a question to be answered. Whether anything's going to come out of the state in the bond bill is another question to be answered. So the idea was that let's wait to see what the advisory committee does, because they would have more up-to-date information, as well as they'll go through the process of really debating this out and coming to a conclusion that we may not accept, but that at least will bring the discussion forward a little bit. So
We'll have an interesting discussion next time.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do we need to vote the operating budget?
No,
We just did the whole.
We did the whole thing? We did the whole thing?
Yeah, one big vote. Yep.
so the only thing left is Article 17, police details. And do we have Chief Pastor?
I thought I would let Chief Pastor go. This was discussed last week. The discussion, the public hearing was held. There were questions about, this is about, since you were here. So this is about the home rule petition authorizing us to have retired police officers serve on details.
Oh, okay.
The idea being if we still want peace officers to serve in this capacity and direct traffic and be sure they have the authority to, maintain order. Using retired folks is a great way to do it. It follows the pattern of several other communities, talks about the authorization. There was one question about liability. Yes, if we hire retired folks, we are responsible for them. That means we are liable, but I think the benefits that the chief has identified are self-evident. We get more, we get paid for details, and
Overtime.
we reduce, details aren't
Oh,
overtime.
right.
And we do struggle to fill details.
That's correct. And there are particularly with increased utility activity, we want these details filled.
right. Okay, I'm sorry, Mike.
There's only one concern that I have. It says here that a special police officer shall not be able to serve if the special police officer has reached the age of 70.
Yes. That is that
I mean, even if I became a police officer, I wouldn't be able to.
I'm sorry to say that even if you became a peace officer, you would not be eligible under this statute. We can always go back and check and amend it later, depending on age, but that's that follows the pattern, amendment.
Right.
And this is one of the few areas where we say, as people age, traffic control, use of firearms, et cetera. It's just an area where we need to have that language.
Okay, so I move favorable action on warrant article 17, police details. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Miriam Ashkenazi?
Aye.
Michael Sandman?
Aye.
Paul Warren?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. And that is the end of our meeting. Oh, I'm sorry, you. Okay, go ahead. Charlie, is there anyone in the Zoom box that is looking to speak?
Well, folks can use the hand raiser Q&A feature if they'd like to indicate that they want to speak, but no one has asked to this point.
Okay. So, Regina.
Thank you. C'est moi. I do want to just go back to something I said earlier and chime in with the comprehensive plan. When I brought up whether or not the geothermal could be expanded to do that whole area, we really didn't get an answer that says it couldn't be done. It said it wasn't being envisioned. Comprehensive plan is exactly the place something like that could be envisioned. How? Because this is the wave of the future. Whenever we can geopolitically and geographically be able to do something with geothermal, and economically, of course, we're going to. Either way, we're heading toward that kind of thing, solar, whatever. Here's an opportunity where we're going to disrupt so much to begin with that it's a real possibility to do multiple buildings. And that should be the kind of thinking that a comprehensive plan does. They think ahead, way ahead. And you've said, Paul, that we haven't done enough of that. And I would like to see that happen. And I can't think of a better time to do it than something we're already going to be digging into the ground, disturbing, closing School Street. I mean, all the stuff we're going to be doing. This is the time to think about the excavation could add a well, whatever it takes. I'm not an expert on geothermal, but it sounds like it might need an extra well or two. So I just wanted to tie it into the comprehensive plan. Thank you.
Okay, well taken. Unfortunately, at Pierce, that would require design changes to the Pierce building as well as design for the other buildings on the Civic Square. Which,
I think it's important to know. I think it is a point very well taken. It is part of why the comprehensive plan is so important and why people should volunteer to be on the comprehensive plan study committee.
I was going to say the same thing.
Better do it. Pointing to whichever camera I think is on right now. But in all seriousness, this is also an area where, because of the MSBA, because of the state giving us money, there are practical limitations here that are going to make it hard for us to move on this particular issue at this particular time. But the point is well taken, and I know LAP and the team will be responsive to that in terms of ensuring that if there is the future for converting this building, library, health onto geothermal power, that is an area where we're going to look to see if we can expand the well.
Is this comp plan going to be only 2 years? I attended all 5 years of the first one back in 2000, 2005.
I don't want to make public comment back and forth, but yes, this public comment process is, I'm sorry, this comp plan process is envisioned as 3 years.
Okay, that's my question. Thank you.
We
That's it.
off camera?
but meeting closed.